The story begins with a guy who traveled across the galaxy. This is a place that has no boundaries. Countless monsters and constellations lurk here. Many different monsters traveled through the galaxy, especially dragons. The main one was a fierce seven-headed dragon. They attacked him from all sides, but he managed to escape and fell into the abyss of the volcano. Before he could really land, he was surrounded by a crowd of animals who wanted to tear him to shreds. They all looked at him with fierce eyes. The main character's name was Randy. His entire body was tied with a red web. In front of him he saw a huge purple spider that was looking at him from all sides. He opened his mouth and wanted to swallow the Randy in one go. From the look of the main character, it is clear that he is not the least bit afraid of these monsters, but he understands that he will have to fight with them for many years. Years have passed. He finally defeated these monsters. The teeth guy looked at the dead monsters that were lying on top of each other and thought that he had spent a lot of time and he needed to quickly return home to Earth. Suddenly he heard a sharp voice talking to him and could not understand who was talking to him. But then he looked at the red sky and realized that it was a constellation talking to him. When the Earth was first connected with the abyss, mankind learned that mythology was not simply a product of the imagination. Beings, called constellations, were the closest to what people considered divine. They blessed people and expanded the ranks of their followers. As the number of followers grows, so does the authority of the constellation. The Earth, with almost billion souls, was akin to a gold mine for the constellations, which fought to take away each other's followers. Among them were much more evil constellations that wanted to take over the Earth, not with the help of blessings with pure force. Randy returned to his good old friend. When they were having dinner, he told them everything that he fought with monsters. Otherwise, they were called a constellation. The Goblin King heard this and was simply shocked. He couldn't believe that his comrade had been fighting monsters all these years. Randy told him that he suffered a lot these years because there was very little food and he had to eat the constellation, so his highest priority was collecting the ingredients. Since his hobby used to be cooking, the Goblin King opened his mouth in shock. He couldn't believe that he had defeated the constellation, but instead of killing for territory, he simply took the milk. The Goblin King looked at the rent and realized that they were like everyone else. He was much kinder than the rest. The Goblin King wanted to quickly try the meat that Randy took. According to legends, he heard that whoever eats the meat of the constellation will become a very powerful king. But when he tried a small piece, his eyes and mouth burned with wild pain. But he acquired magical powers. The power of the fire was preserved with the help of the magical power of the constellation. Thanks to the oil from the mystical constellation, the meat rose to a higher level. The main character looked at him and could not understand what was wrong with this goblin. Randy looked at the stars and missed the Earth and his home. He wanted to quickly return to Earth. Let's go back to the very beginning, where Randy's story began. This was several tens of years ago by the standards of the abyss. Everyone thought Randy was a little strange, and they asked him why he was always lifting that barbell. He always answered everyone that he wanted to become stronger than everyone else. But no one took him seriously. Guy was obsessed with violence from an early age. I studied because he was very much bullied by high school students as a child. Randy was an orphan since childhood, and he understood that he could only rely on himself alone. He realized that he needed to train to protect himself. He became stronger and stronger. He wanted to become a hunter. This is a new profession that has emerged in the era of the abyss of the accounting profession. Where do you practice? Protecting people from the dangers of the dungeon and monsters. Poisons and items dropped after killing monsters. Artifacts from the dungeon where monsters appear are very highly valued, attracting many people who want money and fame. His boss told him that he needed to calm down a little and not risk his life. The boss told him that going into a dungeon with high-ranking monsters was too much. After all, they fought against monsters from the rank and suffered many losses. Even elite hunters die in battles with monsters. The next day, Randy went down with the team into the dungeon to fight monsters. One of the monsters attacked the guy with very high speed, and everyone thought that Randy was finished. But no one knew how much Randy trains. He hit the monster in the jaw. The monster was defeated with one blow. The main character never studied magic and never regretted it. He always believed that martial arts were simple and not as bright and convenient as magic. But the true nature of martial arts, in which he gained as much experience by training every day. was already night. The main character sat on the ground and thought to himself that he had already achieved rank through hard training, but there were still several martial artists who managed to become stronger than him. He was already pissed off, but he told himself that he needed to train even more. Then he will reach his peak. The next day, when the guy was training, Mr. Nia came to him. She was the constellation of the abyss. Another name for her was the goddess of scales. She looked at the guy and smiled. The Libra goddess got straight to the point. She wanted to make a fighting deal with him. The main character was not outrageous and simply said that he agreed. This greatly surprised the goddess of scales because everyone was afraid of her and no one agreed. Randy was only interested in one thing, whether he would gain strength if he won this fight. For him, it would be quite enough. Andy asked the goddess of scales why she chose him because there are a lot of good hunters in the world who have higher ratings and more fame. And the goddess of Libra said that she saw the future, and in a few years a great danger would befall the Earth. The evil constellations will begin to attack the Earth in full force, and when that day comes, you will think that the current dungeon and monsters threatening the Earth were just kindergarten. The Rand was considered the key to preventing this future. The Libra goddess took him by the shoulder and told him not to worry about anything, because she would make him stronger, through long, hard, and inhumane training. At that moment, the goddess of scales was very scared, because what kind of madman would agree to such a contract? She was afraid that Randy would refuse. The goddess of scales extended her hand to him. There was sweat on her face from the experience. The main character understood that if he entered into a contract with the constellation, he would become a new avatar. It was something super complicated. Due to the fact that his soul is attached to the constellation, he will have to live in its constant limitation. Randy understood that this was a great responsibility and was very worried and thought about whether he should agree or not. After all, the whole fate of humanity was on his shoulders. The goddess of scales flew into the sky and said that she prepared a training facility in the abyss because time flows differently in the abyss. You will have to train alone for several hundred years. Even if you refuse during training, you still will not be able to return home. The guy thought for a very long time, but he wanted to become the strongest hunter. After much thought, the guy said that he agreed, and he would go with her. He said that he was not so tied to this world. Randy just wanted to leave a letter to one person. After these words, the goddess of scales raised her hands, and a large black hole formed in the sky. Wall, the goddess of Libra, told the guy that he should think carefully about where he wants to leave his letter, and she will send this letter with the power of thought. Main characters approached the black hole and touched it to pass the tests. After he touched the black hole, he was completely sucked in. Randy looked at the abyss. He was surprised because it almost looked like a dungeon. The main character looked to the side and saw that there was nothing here and simply began to train. At this time, the goddess of Libra went to her colleagues and said that she had found a talented guy and that he would be an excellent candidate for avatars. Her subordinates looked at her and were very worried about her, because when she is so confident in her prophecies, something bad always happens. The main character was training. Suddenly, a large blue tornado glowing with lightning appeared behind him. Randy turned and saw that it looked very dangerous, understood that this was probably a test of the goddess of the scales. But the main character was not afraid at all. He said that in order to become stronger, you need to face danger head-on. When the tornado approached the guy, there was very strong pain. He thought that he would now be torn apart. But he understood that he had to endure it, because this was a test from the goddess. After a powerful magical storm swept through, the magic of illusion that covered the territory of the virtuous goddess of the scales dissipated. This magic was used as a basic security measure, but before Randy could understand it, the magical storm raged again. Even the lady could not have foreseen this. The Libra Queen was very worried because she should have already felt his presence. But the guy hasn't appeared yet. All the servants searched the entire citadel, but could not find Randy. After this, the goddess of the scales became one of the most powerful servants. Her name was Adakvaniel. Adakvaniel promised that she would find him at any cost and would not let him be offended. She understood that this was not easy, because he could be in any galaxy in the world. Even the constellations could not comprehend the entire world. Has been a couple of weeks. The main character woke up on the ground, looked straight, and saw many rocks in front of him. He thought that this was the next place where his next test would take place. The guy saw a huge monster in front of him and thought that the tests were for him to defeat it. Randy's first impression when he saw this monster was that it looked like onyx. and it didn't look like this monster was of A rank. He doubted for a very long time, but then he thought that the goddess of scales had planned everything. At that time, the main character did not yet know that the goddess of scales had lost him and was looking for him. Randy gathered all his strength into his fist and hit this monster with all his might, but the monster had no reaction because the blow was very weak compared to its size. But the main character continued to beat because he understood that he needed to become much stronger in order to defeat this monster. Randy felt in his body that with each blow he was accumulating more and more force. After several thousand blows, he was still able to defeat this monster. Understood that after he defeated him, he was now a rank hunter. Guys understood that he did not have talent like other hunters, but he had perseverance. Thanks to him, he will become the strongest. Suddenly a monster came up to Randy and looked at him with gentle eyes. After that, the main character made friends with the monster. He sat on the monster's head and went to look for a place for the next training. After a long journey, they met a blue storm, which the guy had encountered a long time ago. According to the time of the abyss, he'd been gone for years. The main character thought that this was a gift from the goddess that would lead him to the end test. After he and the monster ended up in another place, the main character realized that he had reached an advanced level and realized how incredible the magical storm was. Storm filled his entire body with chakra and made him stronger, relieving him of fatigue. The main character feels that he is becoming stronger and stronger every minute. He has collected chakra into his fists, and he will not stop using the divine cosmic arts. Randy looked at his hands and realized more and more that he would receive a new level of martial arts. He was really looking forward to a new workout to become even stronger. Main characters looked at the ocean and did not understand how to continue training or passing tests. After this, the guy came up with the idea that he would train underwater. He jumped into the water and saw in front of him a bunch of scary fish that he had never seen in ordinary life. After a little time, he realized that this water was poisonous, and it penetrated into his body. Randy is attacked by poisonous fish and bites him. The main character barely got out of this poisonous water. He understood that if he had been there for a little more time, he would have died. But when the main character was getting out of the water, he noticed a bright light at the bottom. He knew he had to get it. Randy still thought that this was a test from the goddess, and that she was giving him these tasks, but he was grossly mistaken. So the main character began to train and focused to accumulate more chakra. After all, this will save him from the poisonous ocean and fish. But it took quite a long time. The main character was of course very happy that he was becoming stronger, but he had already been here years in the time of the abyss. Randy was absorbed, thanks to the chakra, but without food, his life was very empty. Suddenly, he saw dead blue fish that were thrown onto the land by the waves. The main character looked at this fish with unusual eyes. After all, he hasn't eaten for years. Randy did not understand how to cut this fish for him, because it was with acid, and all the kitchen utensils made of stone were melted. The monster decided to help him and gave him adamantium. Even among treasures, this treasure is highly rated among stone-type monsters. When the guy started cutting fish with this object, he was very surprised that it didn't melt. When Randy took a bite of the fish, green steam began to emanate from his body. The main character felt that his tongue was beginning to go numb, but at the same time he felt that his strength was increasing. When he tried a piece of fish, he realized that he needed to start hunting and eat more fish so that his strength would increase much faster, and thus another years have passed by the standards of the abyss. During this time, the mind of the main character has changed very much. During the years that Randy ate fish, he gained resistance to countless poisons. The main character Mach can easily increase the level of divine space art. During this time, he became very strong. Randy could not understand why the goddess of scales had not yet summoned him. After all, he gained resistance to poisons and reached the level of expert. He would never have reached such heights in his world. After all, the main character approached the monster, and he said that their paths were already diverging. He must leave to become even stronger. He didn't want to endanger the monster. For all, the guy dove into the poisonous ocean. But for him, it was just like normal, because he had complete resistance to poison. Fish no longer attacked him as on the first day. He was already a completely different person, much stronger than then. He swam for a long time, across the ocean, and finally found the source of magical power that he saw on the first day. When the main one was closer, he saw a blue portal, that it was a portal to the next training session. When he arrived, He saw a bunch of monsters in front of him, who looked at him with an evil gaze. One of the monsters approached Randy and said that he would now cut off his head. He took out his sword, and he was ready to kill Randy. Randy was ready to fight him with all his strength. He strained all his chakra into his left fist. After his fist and sword collided, the sword broke into small pieces. Monsters couldn't believe my eyes. He had never seen such a strong person. The main character jumped meters and kicked the monster. After this blow, the monster fell to the ground and was motionless. After that, all the other monsters were simply in shock. They had never seen such strength from a human, but the guy didn't want to fight with them. He pointed his finger at them and said that he came here to take a test. All the monsters looked at him like he was crazy and asked him what other test was needed. One of the monsters began to yell at him loudly. The monster thought that the man wanted to fight their leader. After that, a bunch of monsters attacked the main character. They all wanted to tear him to shreds. There was no pity, but Randy fought them easily. In a couple of minutes, he scattered them all around. But the guy understood that, although it is easy, there are a lot of them. He understood that the open area was too large. The main character could not fight with them, being surrounded on all sides. Monsters couldn't afford to lose to him. After all, it would be shameful for them to lose to an ordinary person. A bunch of mutant dogs attacked him. The guy understood that there was no end to them, and his power is not limitless. The main character understood that he had nowhere to go, and he only had to fight. In the territory under the authority of this constellation. He fought these monsters for a very long time. After the whole battle, how he defeated them all, he saw a small building in front of him. He was very interested in what was there. R kicks down doors, and he shouts that he will borrow this house for a while. In front of him, he saw a smiling monster who greeted him and was preparing soup. Main character was very surprised. Do such restaurants really exist even in such places at home? The monster affectionately answered him, "In order to fight well, you need to eat well." The guy felt ashamed for knocking down the door of such a good monster. I asked him for forgiveness and asked him to eat a little, because he had not eaten for a long time. The main character began to approach him for soup. Suddenly, the monster threw a large pot of poison at him. The main character didn't care because he was immune to the poison, and he didn't even feel it. The monster began to stutter from what he saw. He couldn't understand who he even was. Was this a man who thought he was a monster in his head? A bunch of monsters began to come in near the door to attack Randy. The main character hid in the corner, took a stool, and began shouting for them to come over. Randy said that he would have enough strength for a long time. After these words, the main character began to fight against a crowd of monsters with one chair. At this time, the goddess of scales was very worried about Randy. Her subordinates did not understand how they could find a person in the abyss if he could be located at any point. Not much time had passed since the main character defeated all the monsters. He did not understand how many more there would be. Due to the comprehension of combat skill, Randy's sensitivity increased, and he felt something coming from the cauldron. The guy felt great energy from this boiler. He understood that there was something unusual there. Randy wanted to take this cauldron with him and follow it, but one of the surviving monsters took him by the leg and asked him not to take this cauldron. Tears appeared in the monster's eyes. He asked Randy to leave the cauldron because he had gone through a lot to get it. But the main character had no pity. He hit the monster in the face and said that this monster got this cauldron only by killing others. In a martial arts story, Randy learned that a retired martial artist owned a small classic diner. Randy came here only to look for a suitable place for battles. But the sudden acquisition of an eatery inspired him. He renovated the diner and named it after himself. Everything continued the same. Randy fought monsters to gain experience during the day, and experimented with recipes of the night. So his life as an eatery continued for several hundred years by the standards of the abyss. One day, the former owner of this diner came to take revenge on Randy and his brothers. The main character noticed that he was able to achieve harmony of body and mind through prolonged, deadly fights. He understood that all martial arts masters would go crazy from his skills. But for this, he needed to return to Earth. Monsters lay defeated. They did not understand how the army could not defeat one small, pathetic person. By the time the demons realized that their strategy was not working, Randy also realized that something needed to change. The main character realized that he had already been stuck here for a long time, and he stopped developing. He absorbed energy through research in cooking, but his progress in martial arts stopped. The guy realized that he could no longer experience things of harmony between body and mind. This made him very angry. One day, The main character got angry with all this. He opened the door and told the demons to stop finishing this production. As soon as Randy came out, a bunch of monsters immediately attacked him. Randy was only too happy to fight, because it would increase his true strength and accelerate his growth. When the main character dealt with all the monsters, the biggest monster he had seen in his life came in front of him. The monster laughed very hard and asked Randy if he was scared. After these words, the demon attacked him with all his might, and loudly said that this was his last day on this planet. But the guy stopped his sword with just one hand. It didn't pose any problems for him. The demon could not believe his eyes. No one had ever stopped his sword with such ease. Randy looked into his eyes and said loudly that he was afraid that at this rate he would not advance in his martial arts. After that, all the monsters attacked him. During the battle, the main character remembered one hunter of rank A. He described his strength as a feeling that he was overwhelmed with confidence. However, now that he had reached the expert level, he realized that before in battle, he always felt backed into a corner, randomly attacking in all directions. After long battles, Randy was able to disperse an enemy attack for the first time with the help of divine cosmic art. The main character learned to use the enemy's power against him. This power was called Kuzushi. After a long battle when all the monsters were lying on the ground, the main character simply went into the house and began to cook. The next day, the guy left the house and was very surprised that there was not a single monster, but the demons were waiting for him from the sky and shot fiery rays at him. One of the demons told them to continue firing because Randy is good in close combat. After the attack was over, they saw only the shadow of a man in the smoke. The protagonist successfully blocked all attacks with the help of divine space arts. His body became even stronger after the demon attacks. Randy again began to destroy everyone. The monster in a row, he received the invulnerability skill. The more the demons spent their strength, the stronger Randy became, increasingly widening the gap between them. After several hundred years of these events, all the monsters stood in line to fight Randy. Guy was very surprised that he became close to demons, but on the one hand, it was natural after hundreds of years of battles. Randy took out a card of rank A. This is a magical item received when you first registered with the association. When the owner fills it with his power, it shows the owner's stats. Randy wanted to quickly look at his powers because he had not drawn this card for a long time. When he took out this card, it glowed very strongly and said that he was already an expert hunter level plus. Randy gained so many skills that on Earth he could only dream of it. His status was already so high, due to him possessing many A-rank skills. But the first thing that caught his eye was the divine space art. And rank is the divine art of immunity to all types of poison. The ability to freely control poison and gain energy when absorbing it. Rank A is the harmony of body and mind, the ability to use the body the way you want. Rank in Kuzushi is to direct the subscriber's strength back even if it is greater than yours. Rank and invulnerability, with this ability the skin becomes harder than steel and it is able to block most attacks. Randy was surprised when he read these skills. He thought that this was only available to those hunters who had trained in a unique rank, a martial art, such as the divine twilight art or the yin-yang divine art. Randy didn't know that divine space art is weak in growth rate, but it can create energy stronger than any other martial art. And the guy trained this art for more than 1,000 years by the standards of the abyss. The main character thought that this must be due to a magical assault because he never had any innate talents. Guy thought that the goddess of scales planned all this for his training and development. Through countless battles, his understanding of martial arts had almost reached perfection. He can flawlessly copy any martial arts at a glance. But when the main character read this, he had never heard of such a skill. It is believed that it is difficult to master even one martial art in a lifetime. This skill will allow him to use different techniques depending on the situation, just like a magician. Randy had heard this skill for the first time, but he already realized that it was very powerful. But the main character looked at the card and couldn't understand another skill. There wasn't even a rank. This skill was called World Resonance. The world resonates with him because he is close to reaching the peak of existence. Randy read this and could not understand what it meant. At that moment, he did not know that this thing would cause the whole Earth to go crazy. Guy has been in this world for years, during which time he made friends with demons with whom he fought for centuries. The main character loved to cook since childhood, and he was very happy that he had clients. One day, the main character realized that he had completely stopped developing in this world, and he needed to look for new adventures. The guy could no longer cultivate energy. His growth was completely stopped. The main character understood that there was practically no martial artist stronger than him, and he needed to destroy this wall. Randy understood there was only one way to become stronger, and that was to fight a new enemy. He gave himself a goal to fight an enemy who is many times stronger than these weak demons. He needs to fight someone who is stronger than him. At this moment, while he was thinking, someone knocked on the door. The main character politely opened the door and greeted the guest. He thought it was a new customer to eat his food. He immediately noticed that this demon was not like everyone else. He looked much stronger and more intimidating. The demon immediately turned to the guy and said that he had heard a lot about him and wanted to test his skills. Randy felt the energy of this demon. He already knew that he was very strong, much stronger than himself. He possessed enormous magical power, which was strong even for the demonic race. The main character thought that this was a new stage in the beginning of his training, and he needed to test his strength. The demon took out a huge ingot of adamantium. It was of a size never seen before. The guy was very surprised. He had never seen such a large stone. The demon approached Randy and said that his name was Varigut. He is the first avatar of the Lord of Blood and Battle. He had a proposal for the main character from his master. The demon said that the Master Lord of Blood and Battle was watching the Randy, and he wants Randy to become his avatar. Demon Varigut was sure that Randy would accept his offer. Even though he is a wanderer from the outside world, he is not crazy enough to go against the will of the constellation. Especially if he was offered such an honor to become an avatar, he thought that under no circumstances would he refuse. But the main character said that he refuses because he already has a goddess of the scales. The Varigoth demon was simply furious at his refusal because no one had ever dared to refuse him. The main character immediately felt a strong pressure on him. He was in anticipation because this was the very strong opponent he was waiting for. Varigoth told the guy that he did not feel any constellation inside him. But the main character continued to think that this was all a test, that he would become an avatar when he passed all the tests. Varigoth was very surprised by what he heard. He thought that this guy had been deceived. But the main character did not listen to him. The guy thought that this demon wanted to fight with him. Varigoth began to explain to him that nothing added up in his words. Varigoth told him that the constellations enter into a contract with the avatar because of their desire. Not one constellation will accept someone unworthy as an avatar. And to be desired by one constellation means that other constellations are known to desire you too. Therefore, the constellation immediately concludes a contract with the avatar candidate so that others do not do this. Or, if they want to train their candidate, they do it on their own territory. This is because it is possible in the event of the candidate being intercepted by other constellations while he is wandering outside. If this happens, then the constellations will laugh at the other constellation for tens of thousands of years. But the main character did not agree with the Varigoth. He told him that he had missed a lot. Constellation to which he promised can see the future. He is sure that she chose him because he is the savior of the world. Varigut told the guy that foreseeing the future is a rare and special skill, and she trusted in such inferior ability. But the main character still didn't believe him. He believed that his constellation was the best. After all, she was able to think through the fact that nothing would happen if he trained in a territory that was not hers. After that, Randy began to brag to him about the training he had endured, the tests he had passed. After this, the demon Varigoth began to think. After all, the magical storm of the abyss cannot be controlled even in a constellation. It is beyond the power, it is dangerous and a strong catastrophe, he said. But the main character still didn't believe him. He said that his constellation can control everything. After much thought, Randy did not think that the Varigoth was lying to him. After that, he began to believe him and learned a lot. However, he enjoyed the process of becoming stronger so much that he did not have any thoughts or questions until this moment. Randy returned home very angry. He didn't understand how he could be so stupid and not ask himself such a question for so many centuries. The guy was holding back his tears very hard. He understood that he couldn't cry because every tear depletes his energy and his courage. The next day, Randy approached the Varigot and told him that he already knew that he was not at the training facility, and he urgently needs to return to Earth. But Varigoth said that he was very sorry. but he could no longer leave the territory of the Lord of Blood and Battles. Varigoth flew into the sky and said that he would be very sorry that he had to break such a gem as Randy. Varigoth immediately understood Randy's fighting style. He realized that he had a special walking technique and did not feel any magic. Well, his movements were much faster than teleportation magic. Randy said that this technique is the movement of divine cosmic art, using energy. Another name for this is moonwalk. Varigoth raised his hands up, and a black hole formed there. He said it was very funny, and he wasn't surprised that the master was interested in Randy. But the Varigoth no longer intends to continue this. He was ready to alienate Randy. Varigoth used bloody baptism. A large area of the earth was covered with red poison. The main character understood that he was very strong since he used so much mana. Randy won't be able to hold out for long, even with such a skill of invulnerability to poison. Red poison was called bloody baptism. It is a shower of crimson mana that melts and destroys everything it touches. This technique shows in all its glory the difference between the power of a Varigoth and the power of a Randy. But the main character was able to survive. This happened thanks to the divine cosmic art unceremoniously warned him. This happened because Randy was in great danger. However, when faced with a crisis situation when the enemy was much stronger than him, Randy's mind is very calm. The discomfort of wasting time due to misunderstanding has already disappeared. Randy's mind said that he could. It was like that moment when he was caught in a magical storm. It was not the speed that was important, but the feeling of the flow of the hands. After meditation, Randy's martial arts proficiency increased. He received a skill from the rank of incredible speed. This movement technique allows the blink of an eye to move to the desired location. Varigoth was very surprised. He could not believe that Randy completely dodged the bloody baptism. Varigoth all the time thought that martial arts were studied by weaklings all the time. After that moment, he realized that he was wrong. After this, the Varigoth became more and more angry. He used magic and limited an unlimited amount of mana from himself. On the other hand, martial arts expend the user's inner strength. Compared to magic, martial arts have an energy limit. Varigoth sent a stream of mana at the main character. He began to fight with him at full strength. He realized that martial arts were also amazing. Varigoth took out his sword and said that he heard that the slaves staged an uprising in the territory of some constellation. They wanted to resist the law of this world. Since they went against the constellation, they could no longer use mana. However, it was not so easy to suppress the uprising. Because of the miraculous skill, it was a skill that could be used without borrowing mana from outside. The main character became interested in this story. He believed that it was martial arts. He asked the demon what would happen if he used magic. Varigoth told him that after your body melted from the bloody baptism, Randy, you would immediately meet the Lord of the Blood. The battle continued. Varigoth considered him a special person because no one had ever fought with him in battle for so long. But he was confident in his victory because his master gave him a bloody axe. After the Varigoth swung his axe, a very strong explosion occurred. The TA fight had already lasted an hour. Randy understood that if things continued like this, he would lose this fight. He wanted to find the weaknesses of magic, but he hasn't found it yet. With each attack he landed, he felt himself becoming stronger. Randy gathered energy into one fist. He created a fist of energy, and he hit with all his might. It was quite a strong blow. Even the Varigoth felt it, but it was not enough to defeat him. Varigoth asked Randy how long it would take him to use such hard attacks because they require a lot of strength. The use of all skills, such as Kuzushi or incredible speed, was born for protection. The problem was attacking power. Breaking through the dozens of layers of magic protection with which the Varigoth defended himself, he had to deal a powerful blow. The main character understood that he had to do something because the matter was nearing the end. Randy decided to make a fist of energy the result of compressing energy. But after this attack, he will spend a lot of energy. It was very risky. In theory, the energy fist did not make full use of energy compression. You can press energy to a state of materialization. This technique is called energy materialization. Even Xiao Wan, the greatest martial artist on Earth, was the first to be able to materialize the energy. However, he could only hold the materialization for a moment. Because this technique absorbed a huge amount of energy, he could not use it in real combat. except that Randy has already surpassed Xiaowan in skill, more than 100 years ago. He used this technique and went through the Varicota demon. It was quite a strong blow. The main character destroyed the Bloody Shield spell. Randy looked at him and realized that this technique did not completely kill him. Other demons watched this all far from the side and were simply shocked by their battle. They were surprised that Ser Varigoth had been fighting with him for 6 months already, according to the time of the Abyss. They considered this man a real madman and a legend. Varigoth understood that Randy was at a dead end. Although he can break through the defense of a Varigoth materialized with a divine space art energy attack, he cannot use this deadly attack due to the enormous energy consumption. The main character tried to restore his energy faster and faster. Well, he still needed time to use the cosmic aura again, which gives the Varigoth enough time to restore its defenses. He wanted to finish with one attack. A strong wind arose from his enormous energy, which almost blew Randy off his feet. Varigoth began to call on the Lord of Blood and Battles, blessing his forces to achieve victory. After this technique, the Varigoth's strength increased significantly. Fangs and horns began to appear on his body. The main character looked at this with fear because he understood that he was in great danger. The main character understood why the Varigoth decreased in size. He did this to increase speed and the speed of attacks in one zone. At one point in the battle, Randy realized that his invulnerability had been broken. He needed time to restore it. The main character told himself that if he loses even a little concentration, he will die immediately. He didn't need to relax even for a second. However, the guy understood that he was in a difficult situation, and he had no way out. Main characters decided to use all the energy at once because he had nothing else left. At this point, he learned a new technique called Cosmic Energy Breakthrough. Varigoth screamed in pain, because this technique was quite powerful and his right arm was torn off. Varigoth felt that it did not matter how he should defeat this man. He must end this, otherwise Randy will become even stronger, to the point where he can no longer damage Randy. Varigoth could not allow this. In the territory under the control of the Lord of Blood and Battles, he could not just stand and watch as a new constellation was born in the territory of his great master. At that moment, Randy understood the essence of his power. If he could take mana beyond the limits of his body, then he had achieved real mastery. Of his skills was called the Good Giant Killer. It was a rank skill. At this time, the constellation of the Abyss was watching their battle, and she showed interest in Randy. Lords of Blood and Battle were simply furious. They also watched their battle. The Varigoth demon lay on the ground and admitted defeat. He could not believe that he lost to a man, because he had never lost to anyone except his master before. The main character defeated the first avatar of the Lord of Blood and Battles. For this victory, Randy received strength from the whole world, thanks to the skill of a master of his craft. A defeated Varigoth turned to him. It was clear that he was already on the verge of death. He told the guy that he had earned his right to reject his offer to become a master. Randy thanked him for the good fight from the bottom of his heart. He was very grateful to him. Varigoth gave him advice. He said that he did not know which constellation offered him to become an avatar, but he advised that he should not accept her offer, because Randy could become much stronger, so much so that not a single constellation would look down on him. Varigoth wished that he would become famous in this abyss, and become the first person in the constellation. The main character looked at him and said that he would listen to his words, make him the master on which he accepts the world as himself. Randy began to feel a completely new energy. The glances of the constellations watching him were very surprised by his skills. The main character began to feel the gaze of the constellations on him. He felt how very powerful they were. The main character began to have a shiver in his body, because he imagined that he could become as strong as the constellations. The constellations were constantly targeting each other's territories. If someone accidentally leaves his post, he will be gone in an instant. This is why the constellations watched the world without leaving their thrones, and those who deserved to become their avatars. Then the main character realized that they were watching him all the time, just like the people on the streams. The Lord of Blood and Battles has placed a reward for the Randy. Now every creature that is in this territory is hunting for the main character. Then the main character told everyone that he would become a constellation while they were watching him. He has nothing to fear anymore. Main characters easily defeated these monsters who began to hunt him. He understood that he could no longer leave his fate here to the discretion of the constellation, after he had come so far. Randy returned to the small house to take this Kazan with magic. He noticed that there was quite a lot of energy in this Kazan. Randit stopped viewing notifications and messages from constellations. He didn't care about the ridicule or temptation that came from them. Randy decided that he would leave this place and go on his own way. She easily repulsed their attack. The other demons were surprised by her strength. After this, the angel approached them and asked one more time if they had seen him. Then they politely answered that no, and asked the angel to take pity on them. Since the avatar rarely leaves its territory, the constellations were curious what was going on. Also, people support streamers, support avatars of other constellations. For constellations sitting on their own territory and bound by their own rules, observing the avatars of other constellations was quite simple entertainment. And now let's return to the abandoned sector on the territory of the Lord of Blood and Battles. Randy traveled the world and continued to train along the way. Thanks to the master's degree, the divine cosmic art was perfected. Now the amount of energy did not matter, and the martial artist's skill allowed Randy to use all martial arts perfectly. However, the Markets continued to practice his fist of space. He believed that this technique was not good enough in his execution. Just like when he first learned the divine space art, he put his whole soul into every blow. When Randy decided to leave the territory of the Lord of Blood and Battles, after defeating the Varagoth, he decided to test his skills in the mysterious skill world resonance. Then he took his card and saw that it was written that his title was Invincible Training Master. This meant that no person or creature had trained more than him. Then Randy realized when he had achieved the degree of mastery of the divine cosmic art. He has improved his skills. Now they were simply flawless, and how exactly he was supposed to become stronger and gain constellation status. Then Randy thought that he knew how to do it all. After receiving the divine space art master's degree, he thought that the world seemed to be whispering in his ear. In front of him, he met a bunch of demons. They told him that he really thought that you could escape from them. As long as Randy was in the territory under the control of the Lord of Blood and Battles, it would be very difficult for him to escape from the demons. But the main character didn't even pay attention to them. He looked at his card and thought that he should strengthen his essence by following his principles. He believed that the world was telling him that this was the path to becoming a constellation. The main character simply walked around the zombies and did not even pay attention to them. They were too weak for him. And then the main character understood the secret that he needs to train all the time and never lose. Brandy continued to travel and thought that this was perfect for him because he loved to train all the time. And like this, he will continue to train. He left the corner of the abyss in which the gaze of the constellations could not reach him. He felt himself getting stronger. Also, in the battle with Varagoth, in addition to the New World Resonance, he acquired 2 new skills related to his essence power. In order for Randy to use this skill, he must fight someone who is stronger than him. Well, he understands that if he loses, it's all over. It sounded quite complicated, but the main character liked everything and wanted to become more serious. The guy continued to travel. He met a real monster in front of him. He hoped that this monster would be stronger than him and he would improve his skill. But it turned out to be his old friend with whom he had previously traveled. Randy was very surprised to meet him. The main character notices that behind his friend there are a lot of his brothers. The guy was very happy for him that he found his family. Suddenly another monster appears out of nowhere. Much larger than the other monsters by a factor of the earth was breaking into pieces from this monster. Was a super giant monster that had never appeared on Earth before. He could be considered to be of high rank. The whole world should have been on full alert against him. The main character understood that he was emitting a lot of magical power, and goosebumps ran through his skin. He's definitely stronger than the Varagoth. This monster was called the 9-headed Hydra, simply a 9-headed snake. At the moment, Randy finds the constellation's attention annoying. There were constellations that became such by watching Randy's adventures, but most mocked or mocked him. Some were even hostile, especially such constellations as the Lord of Blood and Battle, whose first avatar suffered a crushing defeat. To them, Randy was a beast who had not yet reached adulthood. That's why they must make every effort to stop Randy from becoming a constellation. That is why Randy went into the neutral zone, where the constellation could not follow him. However, the lawless zone was a place where the strongest ruled. The 9-headed snake began to attack the main character with energy. This was a place that was controlled by monsters comparable in strength to a constellation. Main characters were simply shocked. It was simply amazing magical power. He was just like a bulldozer that destroys everything in its path. The guy's good giant killer skill was activated. If Randy defeats the Hydra, his power will essentially increase. The master of his craft skill was still activated. If he defeats the Hydra, his essence's powers will also increase. The main character understood that his skills forced him to fight this monster. But even without them, his choice will remain the same, because this monster will not just let him go. Randy pointed his finger at the snake and shouted that he was bullying his friend and his family. No matter how strong the snake is, he will regret it. The nine-headed snake attacked him with all its strength. They say that even the constellation fell to its knees from their poison. Randy felt that bloodlust was coming from their 9 heads. Most opponents would simply freeze out of telepathy and bloodlust. But the main character is already used to this. He has already been to many battles in the territory of the Lord of Blood and battles. They collided head-on, and there was a huge explosion from their battle. Randy was able to cut off the head of a snake with the first attack. 8 heads remained. They were simply furious with such impudence, because no one had ever fought them so brazenly before. Well, it wasn't all that simple. The Hydra restored its head thanks to the skill of divine regeneration. The 9-headed Hydra began to prepare its attack. It was going to unleash a lot of poison. It was rumored that even the constellations themselves could not withstand their poison. The main character was surprised. Why should they say their attack? But the answer was simple, because it was a monster that even the constellations feared. The 9-headed Hydra only announces the fate of the enemy. The enemy has no choice but to accept his fate. But it wasn't about Randy. He attacked them from the sky. Hydra could not understand how he stopped their poison. The guy looked at his hands and had a feeling that his head was going to explode because of the telepathic scream. If he did not have perfect immunity to poisons, he could have suffered. His hands began to glow with blue flame, but the feeling was not the same as when fighting the Varagoth. This far exceeds the power of divine cosmic art and energy materialization. R was not backed into a corner. On the contrary, he was able to defeat the Hydra with one blow. However, the battle did not end there. Hydra couldn't keep up with him because he was pretty fast. He generated very quickly. But the main character understood that if he fell under the breath of the Hydra, it would be very dangerous for him. Randy had the invulnerability skill, which was supposed to protect him from any damage. But even in battle against the Varagoth, he could not block all of its powerful magic. And the Hydra was many times stronger than the Varagoth. It was impossible to block invulnerability attacks. Randy could moonwalk on it. He improved his moonwalk skills so much that he began to run on the breath of the Hydra. While Randy was moving between safe zones, he kept losing himself that he needed to be much faster, and a miracle happened. At one moment, the flames and poison emitted by the Hydra stopped. Time slowed down very much, as if fulfilling Randy's dream of becoming faster. The Hydra could not control its breathing intentionally. But none of the martial arts that Randy mastered had such an effect. The main character attacked with all speed, and simply began to destroy the Hydra. The Hydra could not keep track of him. At one point, Randy realized that this was happening for the same reason that his attacks were much stronger, should have been with his level of martial arts and skills. The power of the essence is not the same as what was strengthened by magic or martial arts. This power allowed him to change reality. According to his imagination, he got much more of what he wanted. He gained the skill of insight and used the full power of the essence. Power essence is a force that can change reality. Now he can control this power as he wishes. As a result of insight, the skill of the essence's power intensified. Power of the essence is the power that allows the constellation, creatures that have reached the peak of existence, to rule in the abyss. The constellation used this power to transform the abyss, create kingdoms, and bestow gifts and blessings on their followers. As long as the constellations have enough essence power, they can do anything. Hydra was furious. She already wanted to finish this guy off quickly. Hydra Heiken's stuffy, strong will. With the current power of the entity, Randy could not shake or change his will. The main character's goal was to change the power of the entity. He understood that it would be difficult for him to change the Hydra. He must change himself. The power of Randy's essence penetrated his materialized energy and became a sharp blade, capable of cutting like a huge body of a Hydra. He cut the head of one Hydra, but it could no longer recover because he sealed divine regeneration with the help of his blade. The main character understood that this was not the end, and he did not want to give vent to his emotions. He began to defeat the Hydra, cutting off their heads one by one, thought that this was simply impossible, because they do not regenerate. They could not think that they could lose to such a non-entity as a person. Hydra wanted to hide from Randy. She wanted to hide in a cave and wait until regeneration returned to normal. Hydra began to run away because only 2 heads remained, the rest were cut off. But it was very difficult for them to hide with such a large body. One of the Hydras was against running away because this was a real humiliation for them. But the other head was wiser and said that they needed to hide so that regeneration would return. Otherwise, the Hydra would have died. But it was a real shame for them because they lived years and never faced such humiliation. But the main character is much faster than them, and it was pointless to run away. He was already at the top of them and was delivering his attack. It was such a powerful attack that it tore the Hydra into pieces. Randy's friends were shocked. After all, no one has yet been able to defeat the Hydra. After this attack, Randy could barely stand on his feet, but he admitted that this snake was a strong opponent. After the victory, Randy's power of existence increased thanks to the skill Good Giant Slayer. The world began to resonate with the main character even more strongly. This all happened because the Hydra's blood covered him. He inherited Hydra karma, divine regeneration. Now his invulnerable body could regenerate endlessly. Randy looked at his ability card and thought that he had a very strange life. As a martial artist, he never thought that he would gain many skills. On ordinary ground, even one such skill would make him an A-rank hunter. But that no longer matters. He has decided to go beyond being a hunter and follow the path of the constellation. The main character asked his friend if he needed scales or bones for meat. The stone snake jumped back. He remembered Randy's long-ago actions of eating poisonous fish. The Hydra's body was drained of a frightening poisonous aura. It was dangerous for even Randy to touch the Hydra's body. But the main character wanted to take a risk and cut the Hydra into small pieces. He wanted to eat all the meat before leaving to travel further. Before Randy left, the stone serpent decided to give him a necklace. He did this because Randy saved his family from Hydra. It was an artifact of a necklace under space. This necklace had a very good gift. It sucked up all the ready-made meat that was cut from the Hydra. The Hydra bones can be used to provide a variety of items and weapons, and the durable Hydra scales can be crafted into armor. The main character was glad because he could throw a boiler there and not enriched ore. This was very convenient for him because he was tired of carrying the cauldron with ore on his shoulders for so long. Randy began to tell the snake that while they had not seen him, he had collected a lot of adamantium. The adamantium that he received from the stone serpent a long time ago lies in this cauldron. The main character wanted to learn how to dilute this ore. He dreamed of making a frying pan and a cutting board so that his cooking would be easier for him. Well, the gifts didn't end there, and the snake decided to give him a pink crystal. From the moment Randy decided to become a constellation, he began to see messages about other constellations. He was also able to see the amount of power that creatures like the Varagoth and Hydra possessed. The reason why he was able to use the subspace necklace. It was not that he simply became smarter and observant, but that he was a being capable of reaching the peak of existence. Another name for this diamond was the unenriched orihulk, a metal that radiates pure magical energy. Orichalcum is a metal that exudes the strongest magical energy, and adamantium is the strongest metal that absorbs magical energy. But the main character thought of nothing other than making a knife out of cutlery from orichalcum. He was obsessed with cooking. Stone Snake began to convince his wife that maybe he has problems with his head, but he is a very kind and strong person. Randy studied cooking for millennia while he was the owner of a demonic pub. His cooking skill was quite high. This ingredient was not so easy to handle. It was the meat of a powerful creature that came out after refusing to become the avatars of the constellation. Absorbing an abyssal monster grants power proportional to the absorption of the creature. But if you cook it incorrectly, the dish will be deadly poisonous. But Randy refused to back down. For him, preparing dishes with complex ingredients was a kind of training. When the main character notices that his constellation power has increased significantly, he felt the energy coming from his snake buddies. Randy finally understood why the constellation wants to increase the number of their followers, and the real reason why the constellation became so interested in the Earth. It was a world with billions of potential followers. Any constellation that takes over the Earth will receive the power of an entity that can change the abyss itself. The main character was thinking how he could find a way to quickly return to Earth before the future predicted by the Libra goddess comes. Earth Snake drew a demon. He wanted to show Randy that they were being haunted by this demon. Randy began to look for this demon. He thought in his head if there could be any damage to him. After he visited the territory of the Lord of Blood and battles, he lost all desire to fight demons. But now he was told that there was a demon stronger than Varagoth and Hydra. The main character entered an unusual place and saw 4 creatures in front of him. They addressed him as the Invincible Training Master. The girl said that her master wants to meet with Randy. He should accept the offer because it is very important. Randy asked them what would happen if he refused this offer. But they calmly replied that they would simply let him go and would not fight with him. The main character found this very suspicious. He was interested in what they wanted from him, but Brand agreed because he himself was interested in meeting him. On the way, Randy asked the girl if she had heard from such a planet as Earth. The girl thought deeply and replied that she had heard some rumors. She heard that some constellation was fighting for the gate leading there. Randy pounced on the girl and shouted if she had heard anything else. The girl was very frightened by this behavior but said that she did not hear anything else. The girl said that she heard that there are a lot of souls there, that the owner will help him take over this land, but the guy immediately denied these words. He said that he plans to stop the seizure of land by other constellations. The girl did not expect such an answer, and said that he was not only strong but also noble. The main character did not understand why these demons are called nightmarish. It seemed to him that they were good, sociable, and friendly demons. Even if they can't control their sympathy skill, they don't look dangerous. On the way to the owner, the guy met a demon who wanted to eat him. She shouted at him to give her his desires. She was immediately detained by the servants. She screamed to be released because she knows that they also want to eat him. Randy asked the girl what it was and who she was. The girl replied that these are nightmare succubi. They are weak to the desires of other people. Then the main character realized that they live at the expense of other desires. He knew that he should not have a strong passion for desires. He promised himself that he would be fine without someone close to him, and he didn't need good food or a comfortable place to sleep. They came to the owner's chamber, which was called Dreams and Desires. Guys asked the girl why she didn't go into the chambers with him. The girl replied that a creature like her was unworthy to be between the constellations. Randy told her that he was not a constellation, and he asked the girl to go with him because he did not know the whole chamber. The girl immediately agreed and said that he treats her very well. The main character suspected that something would be much more dangerous than he imagined. R wanted to use her as a human shield. He was sure that the constellation would never want to lose its dear avatar. This meeting is held on the territory of another country. This constellation was undoubtedly more adept at handling the power of the entity than Randy. A lot can happen. Even though Randy was invited, he didn't let his guard down. After all, the title of Invincible Training Master is not given to just anyone. As soon as Randy walked into his room, he had the feeling that he had just woken up. He turned his head and saw a sleeping girl. He could not understand what was happening here. Randy did not notice how the constellation appeared behind him. After all, he didn't hear him at all. So you are a constellation that has been putting on a lot of shows lately. I have long wanted to meet you. The constellation turned to Randy. Randy smiled and said that he didn't want to upset her. But he was not a constellation yet. He still has a lot of work to do on this. The ND constellation did not agree with Randy, because the one who has stepped on the path of a constellation can also be a constellation, since he is capable of the same thing as them. Constellation said that this applies to him too. After all, he could use entities like other constellations. The main character looked at him very askance, because he looked like a child. Randy began to slowly remember what exactly happened when he entered the constellation chamber. Randy asked himself the question, have I not done enough? After all, he has been wandering through the abyss for years. Nay, he refined the divine space art and reached the peak of martial arts. He even reached a level that is higher than all existing ones. The main character asked why he was trying to charm or seduce people, because this is the essence of dreams and desires. Beings who enter this room realize their desires and find peace. It's hard to refuse my gift if you're not a constellation. Randy was in anticipation. He was wondering what she wanted from him. Constellation smiled and said that she would be happy to explain everything if he joined the alliance. Randy was surprised by such a proposal, because it was very unexpected that the constellation could think about people. Constellation smiled and said that he was right. The constellation is selfish. After all, they cannot do otherwise. But selfishness does not always mean loneliness or contrition. If necessary, he allows us to cooperate with them. After these words, Randy understood that the constellation decided to form an alliance because it would be useful for it. Constellation said that he was right. After all, a mortal looks at them as gods, but the constellation is also not easy. If the constellation shows even the slightest hint of weakness, a strong constellation will attack him without hesitation. And for this constellation wanted to arrange an alliance. Of some constellations are not happy with the future which lies in survival. Destruction and devastation caused by the constellation's obsession with conquest. All this will lead everyone to despair, in which no desire can exist, and the nightmare will no longer have anything to feed on. Randy asked whether expanding the territory would not solve this problem. The constellation thought that he was talking about the farm according to the way of desires. Such an idea could only come from the constellation, which was originally a person. The constellation said that they cannot enjoy limitless potential like mortals. Just as Randy is now inaccessible to contrition or complacency, so the constellation could not freely control what does not relate to dreams and desires, without the risk of losing the power of the essence and becoming weak. Constellation showed her small town and said that nightmares require high-quality three-dimensional desires. Not those that gave rise to fear and anger, but a desire filled with ambition, or a feeling of achieving a world of abundance. Constellation said that she is just the god of nightmares, and cannot do such a thing in the real world as it showed. The main character realized that she wants to create an alliance of the weak, and an alliance of truistic constellations. Randy told her that she had revealed too many of her weaknesses. Why is she not afraid if he turns out to be bad and greedy? She smiled and said that she'd been thinking about this for a long time. But I thought that it would be easier to negotiate with him than with other constellations. But she kept silent about the fact that she decided so after seeing his desire. Therefore, if Randy found out about this, he would become more careful. In truth, Randy radiated great desire, but none of them were about conquest or power. The only thing on his mind was training. He always told himself that if he stopped training just because he had achieved perfection in martial arts, he would lose his muscles and the desire to work. Randy said that sounds like a pretty good deal, but he still had a few questions. The constellation was in anticipation of the questions. She wanted to quickly answer all his questions. Randy asked what he should do if they create an alliance. After all, he was quite busy and thought that he could not help her. After his questions, she laughed hard. After all, she thought that he would start asking for benefits, but he started asking for responsibilities. He was a unique person for her. She answered him that as long as other constellations do not attack the alliance, nothing needs to be done. There is no point in responsibilities. The constellation does not take part in what is not suitable for them. She took the bird in her arms and said that he owes something if he wants. The battle between the constellations drags on for so long that it becomes boring. So it doesn't matter where you are. After all, we will have time to come to each other's aid. They shook hands, and Randy said that he agreed to create an alliance. The constellation was very happy that he agreed. Randy thought that he was a beginner who had just begun the path of becoming a constellation. He was sure that the abyss was full of dangerous and feigned constellations. Being in an alliance seemed safer than trying to cope with everything alone, and he thought that he could get help in returning to Earth. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a large firestorm appeared, which was meters high. The main character was very surprised when he saw that a kitten came out of this firestorm. Kitten said that he would treat them well if Randy became his avatar. But instead, he made a foolish decision by joining the alliance of small constellations. When he remembered that they had spoken to him before, it was a member of the Small Constellation Union. Randy asked why he was talking to him using telepathy, because he was standing right in front of him. The girl said that usually the constellation does not leave its territory. Then Randy realized that only the two of them were in the alliance. It was clear from their faces that they were quite ashamed to admit it. The kitten says angrily, "So what? After all, it was still profitable even though there were only 3 of them." Kitten says that he heard that Randy collects adamantium and orichalcum. He says that he can make the necessary items out of them, whatever Randy wants. The girl said that this kitten is a famous blacksmith in the abyss. He can make any weapon for Randy as a gift for joining the union. The main character was delighted with the gift, because he had never even thought about it. But he had very little orichalcum. He asked the girl to do it later when he collected more. Girl said that honestly, she thought that it would be much more difficult to negotiate with him, but he accepted her offer before she could bring gifts. The girl again said that the constellation is an arrogant and selfish creature by nature. Therefore, before their meeting, they prepared what might interest Randy. After that, he received the Orang martial arts scroll. It was called energy vampirism. Additionally, he received orichalcum ingots. Guys looked at their body and were delighted because it was a martial art with the effect of absorbing magical energy. The girl said that energy vampirism is a martial art created by nightmares, but she believed that it would suit him very well. The girl believed that there was not a single nightmare who could become a master of this art. Randy began to think that he had achieved greatness in martial arts, but using magic was a much more effective way than studying martial arts. Randy threw all the bars on the ground and said that he had been collecting them for over years. He could no longer wait for them to make things for him from these ingots. Magma Lava Kittens excitedly ask what kind of armor he wants. He would be honored to do so. Kitten says that with so many materials he can create an epic sword and shield. He suggested that he create an indestructible shield from adamantium and a powerful sword from orichalcum. But Randy said that's not what he wants. He wants kitchen utensils. He wanted an adamantium frying pan and cutting board and a walnut knife and utensils. Lava's Kitten at first thought that he was joking and asked him to answer seriously because this is a serious matter. But Randy said he was completely serious. From the moment he received his first adamantium nugget in the abyss, his dream changed. He wanted the best kitchen utensils that could cook any ingredient in the abyss. Lava's Kitten simply had nothing to say to him. He was completely shocked by his words. The main character noticed his reaction and said that it felt like he was forcing him to do something terrible. But a promise is a promise, so the lava cat fulfills his request with all his heart. Girl said that it was time for her to answer Randy's questions. After all, he said that he wanted to know what awakening was. Randy said that everything is true, that he is still an incomplete constellation. He has just begun to follow the path of the constellation. When he defeated the Varagoth and reached the level of mastery, he saw a message from the world that said that his global resonance was becoming stronger. The world longs to hear his cry. And the Varagoth said at his last moment, "Become a constellation, not an avatar." But the guy continued to think that he is still a person with powerful martial arts, and he needs to take one more step to become a constellation. But the girl simply answered him that she had already said everything and that he was a constellation. She explained to him that there is no such thing as an incomplete constellation. A constellation is a constellation and everything is simple. But Randy still asked further. He was interested in what awakening was, because she said that he still needed to awaken. Girl replied that she meant that he still did not understand that he was a constellation. Even at this moment, he thought that it was not completed. Although the girl understood that he was a very special creature, even among the constellations. Randy began to complain because she called him special, but he didn't even know how to use magic. The girl touched his nose and said that mortals very rarely become constellations. The girl began to tell her story that she was simply born in a constellation. The girl said that her power of existence, dream, and desire was released by nightmares. It all came together when they created me. This is the true form of the mistress of dreams and desires. Most of the other constellations are the same. Lord of blood and battle, this is the kitten of lava and magma. They are the constellations of birth itself. For a being who believes that being a constellation is natural, but the girl explained that the guy was already considered a constellation. The girl told him to accept that he was a constellation. Then Randy simply accepted the fact that he was a constellation. He immediately felt a great surge of strength. He received a skill called World Resonance. As the Constellation Invincible Training Master, Randy can wield the power of the constellation. The main character has completely changed. His hair color and length have changed. This all happened from a great surge of energy. Other constellations began to notice that a new constellation was opening its eyes to the depths of the abyss. The main character felt very good, because he could give a great blessing, and even a message was sent. Girl said that it was better for him not to go to other avatars, because they have their own constellations and he could have problems. So Randy has to be careful. The main character grabbed his head and said that from now on, if he wants to do something, he will have to think times because the avatar is the most important factor for the existence of the constellation. After all, any influence of other people's avatars can be regarded as a provocation. Randy could get the answer to any question just by thinking about it. Guy remembered the past, and he could not understand how he did not realize that he was already a constellation, because he continued to rush from side to side, trying to become the strongest. Although he was lost and wandering in the abyss, he accepted this as training from the goddess. Rand even thought that the magical storm was a convenient way to travel, as well as a training tool. After he remembered his mistakes, he was upset, because he really thought that he was training, and it was all in vain. He believed that this was all training from the goddess of the scales. Girls told him if he has an avatar, then he should try to concentrate on it. At first, Randy said that he did not have an avatar, but then he remembered his friend, the stone snake. Girl also added that he can restore his essence power. After all, you can accumulate even more power of an entity than the limit allows, so you don't have to save it. Thus, the constellation can use their avatars to explore the abyss, and you can also look through the eyes of allied avatars. In this way, one can share vision between worlds. The main character pointed his finger at the sleeping girl and said that there is a place where he cannot use all this. The girl said that he was talking about imprisoned nightmares. She could hide certain areas if she didn't want them to be seen. Constellation said to greet Randy. She sent a Rooney to him. This is because I have the best control over myself. After all, it's hard to control your desires with a nightmare. The main character remembered the incidents that happened to him and immediately understood what she was talking about. The girl asked if he had any other questions. Randy said no and thanked her for the explanation. Girl said that she was pleased to meet the constellation, expressing gratitude. Randy became a constellation quite recently, and the girl advised him that he should rarely encounter other constellations. Indeed, in the struggle between constellations, the one who has more avatars and greater power of the essence has an advantage. But the place where Randy arrived after much training, this is the beginning of the whole world. This is the poor constellation. The main character asked her if she had ever heard about planet Earth. The girl replied that she had heard that many strong news were awaiting the opening of the gate there, due to the fact that there are many souls there, which is rare in the abyss. Randy said he was from this land. The girl answered him that the gate between the abyss and the earth was already open. Everything must turn into chaos. But fortunately, it's not that bad. But thanks to your girl's explanation, Randy finally understood everything. The constellation that arrived on Earth only looked closely at each other, but did not collide, because they will only weaken if they fight among themselves. Some cunning constellation could simply take control of the souls and defeat the constellation that is fighting. And so instead of just fighting, they decided to increase the number of their followers, Randy thought. Girl thought that he was very lucky. After all, there must have been relatively good constellations nearby when the gate opened. After all, even the evil and cruel constellations will not come to a common agreement, and will simply try to seize power by force. After all constellations behave this way. What is their nature? They simply have nothing to lose. The girl was sure that Randy was nervous, because he left his home planet to the constellations that came from nowhere. It would also be nice to have a constellation in their alliance whose followers are the souls of the earth. Then Randy flew into the air and cut his long hair because it really bothered him. The reason why his hair grew so suddenly is because he accepted himself as a constellation. The girl asked Randy what decision he had made. Does he really want to return to Earth no matter what? The main character simply smiled and said that long hair simply interferes with training. The girl wanted to give the guy advice since he was planning to return to his native land. If, as the girl said, the gates to Earth are open, and the nearest constellation is watching them, Randy didn't think that it was necessary to openly show that he was a constellation, because even good constellations will be hostile against him. If this is a constellation capable of fighting for the Earth, then they are much stronger than it. And no matter how good the constellation is, they will not close their eyes to the fact that they may lose the soul in which they owned. Randy asked the girl, does she really want him to hide the fact that he is a constellation? The girl replied that it would be much better and safer for him, and that he did not need to use the power of the essence. After all, they won't take their eyes off him if they find out that the constellation has returned back to Earth. She advised him to mingle with the ordinary inhabitants of the Earth, and then quietly and carefully acquire your followers. And they will become souls accepting his essence. After all, this is a constellation on Earth. The main character asked the girl if there was a constellation on Earth that knew about him. The girl grabbed her chin and said that it was possible. It would be nice to join him in our alliance. After all, this will increase the strength of their alliance. Randy tried to tell the story of how he fell into the abyss after meeting the goddess of the scales. The girl replied that this is a very strange story, but she had heard about this constellation. The guy said that even without it, it's impossible to see the future. It doesn't happen that often. Although it doesn't seem like it, she could have had a good plan. Girls replied that she heard that she is a constellation who constantly exposes herself to ridicule by misunderstanding her prophecies. Well, it seems that it is almost impossible to predict the future very accurately. What's the point of prophecies if she can't benefit from them? The girl did not understand whether the goddess of Libra would help their alliance. Randy said that considering how she tried to stop the evil constellations, she is most likely collaborating with other constellations. Lava's girl and Kitten had very strong doubts about taking her into their alliance. After all, she turned out to be very stupid, but they still decided to accept her. They asked Randy to ask her to join his alliance, since he was returning to Earth. Randy was sure that she would help them, although he was worried how she would react to the fact that he became a constellation. Randy thought about how to find a way to contact her. He asked his alliance friends if they knew how he could contact her, but they didn't know a bit. They did not understand how they could know where such a constellation was. Randy began to worry very much whether he would be able to return to Earth in time. After all, his land was in danger. The main character turned to the servant who accompanied him around the palace. She asked him where he wanted to go, because this territory was full of beautiful places. Randy said that he already has a place in mind. He heard from the owner about the Fountain of Enlightenment. The girl was surprised that he wanted to go to that particular place. It was a place for their training to learn to control their desires. The main character smiled and said if he had to wait here, then he should also go through the training that was only possible here. When they arrived at the place, the girl said that she heard that in the old days, many nightmares used this place. But since the nightmare constellation was born, it has been banned. Randy asked why this was so. The servant answered because it is incredibly dangerous here. After all, she heard that many nightmares went crazy during training. Rand. I walked up to the well and looked down. It was the Well of Enlightenment. Randy knew that the essence of the training was to drink water from the well. However, if this were really so, then it would not have been sealed and banned. After all, the stronger a person's desire to draw out water, the heavier the water becomes. The main character began to draw water from the well, and noticed that this water was quite heavy. He wanted to meditate and get rid of his desires, but the water would not decrease. When Randy began to draw water from the well began to speak his wish. He said if he let go of the water, he would return to Earth. Suddenly, Randy's ex-girlfriend comes and touches him. She said when they broke up, it didn't happen on a good note, but Randy understood that it was all manipulation, and it wasn't really happening. At this time, Lava's girl and Cat were discussing his training. They believed even if he is a training master, it will not be easy for him. After all, this well excites and intensifies desire, and the bucket becomes many times heavier. Lava's kitten was worried whether the training master would be okay, but the girl was not worried at all. The view of the constellation was on a completely different level than nightmares. At least he won't go crazy. Girls were wondering what kind of illusions were tormenting him. She thought there was something incredible there. Randy was almost on the verge of letting go of the bucket. The rope was very stretched and could break at any moment, but Reddy continued to train, because using the weight of his own desires, in this way he gets rid of them. He is addicted to training. No wonder it became a constellation. Girl with Lava's kitten looked at this and thought that this was too much. Then they realized that the essence of the training was that he should pull out a bucket of water, as hard as his desire. After all, the one who wants to pull a bucket from the well sees illusions that correspond to his desire, and the water becomes heavier. The servant was very worried about Randy. After all, she knew that many nightmares had gone crazy, trying to complete this training. She asked Randy. Maybe he has some problems, but the main character calmly replied that he was fine. It's just that for the first time in a long time he found a good trainer. He understood that most could not even lift a bucket. After all, they had very weak temptations. Randy told himself that he would resist, because he has consciousness, and he will not succumb to any temptations. Randy spent most of the day practicing with the Well of Enlightenment. He told himself that he could do cardio with light weights if he cleansed his heart, and strength training if the desire gives free rein. And the remaining time he rested and worked on tactics, sparring with Aruni. Constellation Desire told Randy that she thought it would be a lot harder and longer for him, but apparently he was having a good time. Randy replied, "It's not like he had any reason to give up training. When he first had free time, he immediately started training. Hardly anything due to his haste. Girl said that he is a man of the army and the battle constellation, but Randy may have much more potential. He may have the potential to cultivate avatars and establish his kingdom." Lava Kitten finished making cutlery for Randy. It was orichalcum cutlery. When the main character took it in his hands, he was very happy about it. He told himself that with this, he could cook any ingredient. Plus, he can use the knife as a sharp blade in battle. He swung the knife and splashed out a lot of energy, which was a very unpleasant sound. Constellation of Desires was against such fun, because this knife was sharpened by the Constellation Blacksmith. If Randy doesn't handle it carefully, he'll destroy everything around him. After walnut cutlery, it was the turn of adamantium utensils. The girl and Lava's cat put on glasses to watch Randy shoot at the cutlery and test its strength. He gathered some energy into his fist and was ready to shoot. The force of the blow was not weak. It was amazing because after such a powerful attack, there was not a scratch on them. Clava Kittens boasted that these utensils are much stronger than magic armor. Randy's short break in the world of nightmares was over. Although he was a man when he entered here, he left being the constellations. Randy was about to leave. All the servants asked him to visit them more often. Everyone cried behind them because Randy was very kind, and everyone liked his delicious food. He was called Master Gukbab. But as an invincible master of training, Randy, Nightmares nicknamed him the Master of Gukbap. This is all because he made some food with the help of new items. The dish was called Gukbab, made from hydra meat. Everyone looked at this dish with caution, because they had heard that the hydra meat was quite poisoned. Randy told Arnie's servant to call her friends. After all, he had a lot of meat, so he did it for everyone. Constellation of Desires convinced her avatar Aruni that she didn't have to try it if she didn't want to. After all, hydra meat contains deadly poison, and you don't need to expose yourself to such danger. But Aruni ate everything with gusto. She said that this dish warms you up very much, and she felt her stats growing. Other nightmares also asked for food. They were already impatient to try this dish, and there were quite a lot of them. After all, nightmare obsession with Gukbap has caused a lot of fuss. The situation was resolved only after the intervention of the hostess. The main character thought that he could practice cooking and increase the power of the essence, but he was a little uncomfortable. As a result, this ugly scene was made because of him. Randy reached the border of the world of nightmares. Next was the territory ruled by the Ophiuchus of Plague and Darkness. This area looked intimidating. Randy thought that he needed to use a little of the power of the essence so that this gloomy guy would not stress him out, but he decided to hide his essence from the world. Randy thought that this would be much safer for him, and after that, he disappeared from the constellation's visibility zone. He noticed that the world had become very quiet and calm. He could not believe that he was being carried away by a stream of messages from the constellations, due to the fact that he could not do something simple. Ophiuchus of Plague and Darkness orders all avatars to find an invincible training master. He told his avatar when they found him not to fight him alone. There's no way they can beat Randy, so that they under no circumstances try to use force on him. Otherwise, they will die. Skeleton told him to let Randy become his master's avatar. If Randy joins him, he will forget about the disrespect and recognizes Randy as a valuable subordinate. But the main character just smiled and thought that it was true. It looks like there is a magnanimous constellation here. I believe that Randy has not yet realized what is happening. The avatar tried to deceive Mamet. Abyss Constellation were well prepared for this type of scenario. The skeleton pointed the sword at him and said that if he refuses this offer, his master will come and deal with Randy. But the main character was not at all afraid of him. He covered his nose because this skeleton stank of rot. After that, Randy shouted that all the harbingers of plague and darkness should not hide behind their avatar and show their essence. The skeleton was shocked by his behavior because he still did not understand what situation he was in. Randy turned to the skeleton and told him to quickly call his owner because it would be worse, but he had no intention of going out. Then Randy said he would make him do it. After that, Randy began to destroy everything around him. He said that he would destroy everything when the constellation did not come out. The main character shouted that he would be considered a coward if he didn't come out. After all, he cannot even defend his territory. The meaning of such statements was absolutely clear. Then Randy received the skill of being kind and a giant fighter. In case of victory, his essence power will be strengthened. Then the Mistress of Nightmares contacted him and said that it was real madness to fight against the constellation. Then Randy realized that they could be watching him, because he had completely forgotten about it. The Mistress of Nightmares said that challenging the constellation to battle was recklessness. Rand received the basic level of Space Tunguska. It was added by Divine Cosmic Art. Original motive. As a training master, even after Randy fell into the abyss, he was never a force to be reckoned with. Being a weak person, he always struggled with hostility. From the point of view of the powerless, he did everything he could. However, after he became a constellation, Randy changed a lot, although he himself was not aware of this fact. He was hiding all the time from the older constellations. Like the last cowards, he remained in neutral territory, away from the prying eyes of the constellations. Randy lost the point of fighting. He told himself that he had to follow his own path, living like a constellation. The fact that Randy's opponent was a constellation did not change anything in his attitude towards him. He was not the least bit afraid of other constellations. Large green smoke appeared above the main character. Randy immediately realized that it was a constellation. This flying constellation looked quite terrifying. It was too late to escape. It was a mid-rank constellation. It was called the Herald of Plague and Darkness. He appeared before the avatars and those doomed to death. The messenger of Plague and Darkness thought that his opponent was crazier than he expected. After all, for some reason the constellation is much weaker than it. The messenger of Plague and Darkness did not understand why such a weak opponent was challenging him. He grabbed his beard and said, "If Randy is defeated, then he will be completely destroyed, even if he gets involved in this battle." The messenger of the Plague understood that if he won, he would receive nothing. But if he lost, he would lose a lot. However, he had nowhere to go. If he did not accept his challenge, then his reputation status would drop greatly, and other constellations would mock him. The main character did not even talk to him, and immediately attacked him. Although Randy was the first to challenge, he did not let his guard down. After all, this was his first battle with the constellation. Constellation of Darkness understood that the difference in the strength of their existence was too great, and he must end this quickly, using his power. But for Randy it was beneficial to end this fight quickly, because if the fight dragged on, then Randy would have very little chance of winning. Randy immediately decided to start with his strong attack, which was called Cosmic Fist. Constellation of Darkness felt pain for the first time, as if his essence was being torn apart. Other constellations, including the Harbinger of Darkness, rarely fought in person. I turn on the Herald of Darkness. He understood that this was a crazy technique that Randy used, but he still didn't understand whether it was magic or not. Randy realized that he also works in technology and he should not miss his chances. He began to use his maximum to quickly end this fight. The main character jumped up and hit him with the help of energy cultivation. The force of the blow was so great that the earth was broken in half. After this attack, the main character realized that his enemy was playing weak, so that he could then unexpectedly attack and deliver a winning blow. Servants of the Constellation of Darkness watched this battle, and they were all amazed at the battle of the two constellations. They understood that they were very, very far from this level. Services of Darkness did not understand how such a pitiful constellation as Randy could resist their inimitable master, the messenger of Plague and Darkness. The guy understood that the battle was just beginning, and it would be very, very difficult for him, because he understood who his opponent was. Suddenly, the Constellation of Darkness began to beg Randy not to touch him, because he was giving up. But the main character said that such a trick would not fool him, and hit him hard in the face. But the Constellation of Darkness begged him to stop beating him. He promised to give him his territory and his avatars. Girl with Lava Kitten Lava was simply amazed. They did not expect such a turn of events, because it was a great shame for the constellation to admit defeat, especially to give up their territories and the avatar. Lava Kittens told Randy that the constellation is actually giving up. the kind of constellation I can never remove about the oath with my life. But Randy didn't understand what he meant. Why would the constellation give up? Kitten says if the constellation is badly damaged, he can give up. The main character smiled. He did not expect that victory would be so easy. After the victory, Randy improved his skills significantly. His body began to glow with yellow flames. He felt much stronger than he was. Then Randy extended his hand directly and said that his martial arts are in good condition, because they even work on the constellations. Randy felt a strange sensation. He began to feel rivers of pus and buildings made of rotten rivers of tumors. Randy began to feel each avatar, because these were his new avatars in a new kingdom. Looking at Randy leaving, the harbinger of plague and darkness was confused. After all, battles between constellations are dangerous. The wind risks both sides. The winner takes everything from the loser. This happens in order to prevent a future threat from the loser. Completely erasing the existence of the loser is common in the constellations. Constellation of Darkness understood that this guy spared him and left him a kingdom with avatars. Although he was glad, this feeling of loss overwhelmed him. Kitten told Randy that he had never seen anyone take a constellation as an avatar. He believed that leaving the kingdom and the avatars was a mistake. Well, Randy said that he didn't care at all, because he wouldn't be able to control them. Randy believed that this technique that he came up with in the battle with Aruni was his greatest acquisition. Get so close to the enemy that he cannot use magic. Do not give him a chance to use the power of the essence, and then defeat him. The main character believed that he could fight. Even if he encounters a constellation much stronger than him, he will be able to resist it. After that, Randy went to other constellations. They told him that they saw how he defeated the harbinger of plague and darkness in the constellation. They were quite struck by this. One of the constellations told him that he didn't think that he would show up here, but he seemed to have no sense of fear at all. One of the constellations said that he could not be defeated so easily as that rotten weakling. After all, he had to prepare to face all the forces of his kingdom. It was a mid-level constellation, the one who turns back time. That's what Randy hoped for. He was ready to demolish them all with his power. Having heard rumors of what had happened to the harbinger of plague and darkness, they prepared for all sorts of scenarios. In other words, now Randy had to fight all the avatars of the kingdom. It took him years by the standards of the abyss before he appeared before the constellation, while Randy still won. Further, he met a mid-level constellation, a voice from the depths of the sea. This constellation said that she had heard a lot about him, that he had defeated many enemies, but the constellation said that it would be quite difficult to defeat him. After all, there would be no point in their battle, and the constellation shark proposed to find a compromise. Well, Randy said he didn't agree and attacked from behind them, catching them by surprise. After years of fighting, Randy emerged victorious. Randy's opponent was a mid-level constellation called the Preacher of Truth. The Preacher of Truth had heard about him. He knew that he was called the Invincible Training Master. But this constellation was distracted by the lava kitten, and at that moment Randy could sneak up unnoticed and attack it. Thanks to the kitten, this fight lasted only hours. This was considered one of the fastest battles between constellations. One day, the main character was preparing food and thought that he still had not found a way to return to Earth. But it seems he was in no hurry to do this. After all, he had not been on his territory for a very long time. If Randy meets a message, he will fight it. And if he meets a monster, he will eat it and cook a delicious meal. He had a constant battle in cooking. Friend, at an ordinary moment when Randy was just having lunch, a blue gate appeared in front of him. This gate randomly appeared in the abyss. Randy thought it was a good way to meet new opponents. Randy didn't know what was behind these gates, but he decided to take a chance. He hoped that behind these gates was the planet Earth. It's like in the lottery you have to try, he told himself. When Randy entered the gate, he saw in front of him an ordinary forest with mountains. He couldn't believe his eyes. Was it really planet Earth? He thought he had won the lottery. Lava Kitten. It would be interesting to know who brought him here. But first, Randy wanted to find people to make sure that this planet is Earth. Well, when Randy entered this village, he saw goblins in front of him. The main character at first thought that a lot of time had passed, and people had disappeared and goblins appeared. Then the kitten told him that although it looks like Earth, it's not it. It was a goblin planet. Otherwise, this planet was called Goblin Paradise. Although Randy saw goblins in the dungeons from time to time, he thought that they were ordinary monsters. Contrary to his expectations, they could create a real village. Even though the Goblin Kingdom looked like Earth, the planet was much closer to planet Earth. This means that portals appear here much more often. Goblins of Ephesus, compared to humans, fought with monsters from the abyss for much longer, and therefore the system for fighting monsters was much better than that of people. However, this system only worked when they encountered regular monsters. Suddenly, a white wolf appears on this planet, devouring planets. They called it Borealis lupus. They said that the powers of this monster were like those of a constellation. The goblin commander immediately went to fight with him. One of the goblins told him that he did not need to go there, because it was very dangerous. Well, the head of the goblins said that he is a commander. If he cannot fight this monster, then he will not be able to look the eyes of his people. The Goblin King said that he was not a coward. He said that he would not run away and would answer for his debt. This king's name was Odaigon. It was read by the strongest magician of Ephesus. Even if this was the end for the hilt, he promised to at least leave a big scar on this monster so that he would never forget about it. Randy suddenly appears out of nowhere. He attacked this monster with his powerful attack. The monster screamed in pain. The main character expected that everyone would be surprised at his appearance, but it was expected that everyone would be surprised at his strength. Randy understood that he only had one chance. In terms of combat power, this wolf is comparable to a mid-level constellation. Well, it was not a constellation, since its existence is not focused on one thing. The main character realized that he now had a chance to stop him, and he began to attack him with full power. Randy decided to use everything he had. He flew up to a height of M and began to release blue energy from his body. Wolf was unable to repel this attack and was defeated with one blow. After this victory, Randy's skills improved even more. Fortunately, everything went according to Randy's plan, and the fight didn't last long. The main character always felt a sense of crisis when faced with constellations or monsters comparable to them. Randy understood that these were creatures that mortals did not dare to resist. Kitten says that such powerful creatures have practically no experience in fighting opponents equal to them. The kitten praised Randy for his strategy. Randy thanked him for this, however. If he had withstood his final attack a little longer, or had been prepared in advance, this battle would have lasted for several centuries. The main character understood that there were still many things in which he was weak. The Goblin King walked up to Randy and knelt before him. He said that other constellations never helped them, but Randy was the only one who came here and helped his people. After that, the goblin bowed even lower and said that now Randy is his god and his master. After this, the other goblins also bowed before him and swore allegiance to him. Randy was shocked by this behavior of the goblins. After this, the power of the Randy constellation increased depending on the number of souls who worshipped him. The world resonated with him. After this, his power over the constellation began to awaken more. He gained the skill of the constellation territory belonging to the invincible god. The main character looked at his hands and said to himself that his essence had become much stronger. Lava Kitten says that he has gained a lot in his mind and has become much stronger. But Randy thought about not showing his strength to people. He believed that people are not like goblins. They will not obey. The reality is that they are constantly trying to destroy and fix others for themselves. There were many similar cases. Before leaving, when Randy was about to leave, the Goblin King ran behind him and said that he wanted to go with him. The main character told the goblin that he was heading into the abyss, and a mortal like him would be very dangerous and difficult to follow. Well, the Goblin King said it didn't matter. He will follow him even into the darkest depths of the abyss. After that, the goblin bowed down before him again and said that he was the Goblin King Odaigon. He said that his people must pay back Randy's debt, otherwise they will live with a greater desire to do so. The main character felt that this goblin had a very powerful magical power that surrounded his entire body, even compared to earthly hunters. He is a very powerful force to be reckoned with. After that, Randy turned his back and said that his mage abilities would be very useful to him. He allowed him to go with him, but only told the goblin not to regret it later. Goblin asked him what he wanted to find in the abyss. Randy replied that he wanted to find a planet called Earth. After that, he asked the goblin if he had heard about it. Well, this is the first time Goblin has heard about such a planet. Story until today, how the Randy man became an invincible master of training. And that's how the Goblin King became his subordinate. On the way to the abyss, they saw a very powerful storm. Randy said that they need to go into this storm to get to the abyss faster, he told the goblin. Yes, that he can refuse because he is not forcing him. Well, the Goblin King said that he would go there because he considered Randy his master after he saved him. Pieces of land, the size of a continent, were destroyed in an instant. Goblin was very surprised, although magic curtains are not so rare in the abyss, but this particular one was very strong. The Goblin King asked Randy if he once used a magical storm. Renai said if done correctly, this is a very fast and good way to travel in the abyss. The Goblin King heard that even in the constellation they avoid him. Well, for the sake of his master, he was ready to go to the end. Goblin King said, since this size of the magical storm is too large, it will produce a lot of byproducts and disappear. The main character asked what byproduct means. Goblin said that many places in the abyss are actually byproducts of a magical storm, and this magical storm will leave behind a dungeon. Monsters of the abyss appear there. If you don't deal with them, they will simply wipe everything off the face of the earth. Since the magic and monsters of the abyss penetrated the earth, people's lives have changed a lot. Core Island with magical powers, an environmentally friendly way to obtain energy on Earth. Thanks to the connection of the Earth with the abyss, humanity received a new environmentally friendly way of obtaining energy. Besides, other parts of monsters are also very useful. Thanks to all this, the level of biology and other sciences has risen greatly. Against the backdrop of these numerous opportunities, the Parker Pound developed rapidly. Pharmaceutical company Kaiser, a company specializing in artifacts, major players in the abyss industry. Goblins and Randy continued to travel across the galaxy to find Earth. The goblin was very sick because he could not move in space. Goblin was very surprised that Randy moved through space with ease and did not even feel sick. Randy said that magic is a convenient thing. The goblin was very glad that the owner appreciated his skills. He said if the owner needed to learn magic, he would definitely help with this. But the main character refused this. He was not interested in magic. He asked the goblin to check the area he flew through. It was like watching in a game. Constellations can be seen through the eyes of their avatars. Goblins hovered in the air. Reggae ordered that he check what was in the shadow of the building in front of him. In the distance, they saw some things scattered. When the goblin flew closer, he saw that it was something unusual. There were some symbols written there that the goblin did not understand. The main character began to take a closer look. He could tell that it was used to wrap a special magical weapon. Most likely it was made by the same tribe that built this temple. When the goblin looked at the bottom, his gaze immediately changed. He said that Randy was right. His prediction had come true. It was a huge horde of ghouls, a couple thousand for sure. Goblin said that he could kill them all if his master finished it. With the help of the 7th Circle Zone of Effect spell, he could erase these pathetic ghouls and the temple in one fell swoop. Turning them into ashes, then they can take care of the boss who is hiding somewhere. The goblin asked to do this to prove to Randy that he was his proud avatar. But the main character said that he would calm down. After all, since there are a crowd of ghouls there, it could mean that they surrounded someone or something. Randy began to run with all his might. He said that he must save those who were trapped. With just one attack, he has already killed more than zombies, because he read that they have people and or monsters in captivity who know how to get to the ground. He believed that they would bring him to Earth. Then the main character realized that what they found in the square was earthly food. When Randy was fighting monsters, he asked the goblin to turn him into something small using magic. After all, if he presents himself in this form to those who are stuck there will be a lot of problems. After all, not all goblins stick to the abyss as adequate creatures. Most of them are very evil and bloodthirsty goblins. Hunters from the ground are already accustomed to meeting goblins in dungeons. The goblin was furious because he did not understand how he could be considered a monster because he is very kind. Randy sighed heavily and said that these are people and he needs to accept it. It would be better if he reincarnated. The goblin began to transform. He could use the magic of the 6th circle polymorphism. Randy was very surprised because he looked like a perfect person, and his outfit was like that of a wizard. Randy noticed that the zombies simply surrounded the hunters and did nothing. He was wondering what kind of boss was here. Zombies began to climb the rock. The goblin said that if they had intelligence, they would not simply surround this mountain. It is possible to send zombies. That's all he can do. Then there was a very high probability that Ghoulie controlled a really strong army. In the abyss, these zombies were known as the Ghoul Kings. They were quite strong and scary. King Ghuli Tarun. This is a monster assembled from 1,000 ghouls. Those who see only ghouls and try to find whoever controls them risk suffering from a surprise attack. Then the goblin in a human body made a verdict that they are not very dangerous, because for the majority they do not pose any particular danger. But those whose skills are above average are crushed by numbers. There was a group of hunters in captivity. They were very careful about food, because they understood that they were here for a long time. They did not hope that someone would save them. Was their day of captivity. On the first day they lost part of their provisions. But they found an underground shelter in which they were able to hide from the ghouls. Then they managed to close the door, but could not get out because they were surrounded by thousands of zombies. One of the zombies almost reached them, but was slammed by the stone door. Then one of the hunters finished him off with the help of the arrow's flame. The commander hit his head on a stone and cried. He realized that he had let his team down, but there was no other choice. His team spent a whole month without the opportunity to do anything. At this moment, Randy appears. He knocks down the stone door with his strength. This was quite unexpected because they did not hope for salvation. The main character immediately asked them if there was anyone here from planet Earth. The captain was in shock. He thought that only death awaited them. He didn't expect anyone to save them. Other hunters began to rejoice very much. There were tears in my eyes with happiness. They thought that the rescue squad had come for them. One of the hunters said that his team is complete idiots, and they need to prepare for battle. This hunter's name was Gan. He read that these were not liberators, but their enemies who wanted to kill them. He pointed his finger at them and said that the restrictions on entering the dungeon would only allow one person. How could there be two here? Randy grabbed his head and said that he didn't know that there was a limit per person. He apologized for this misunderstanding. The main character said that he did not get here through the entrance to the dungeon. Then Gan asked him how he got here. Randy said that they got here through the abyss. They had a very long journey, and the hunters' faces showed how surprised they were. Randy came up with a story that they were lost in the abyss. After the gate was opened, accidents often occurred. Many were pulled into a gate or dungeon, where they disappeared. The majority did not return, but there were the lucky ones who succeeded. But the hunter Gan did not continue to believe them. He asked them how they could confirm this. How can they prove that they are not monsters but real people? Randy said that it doesn't matter whether they believe him or not. Even if they don't believe, they have no choice. After all, they were two energetic individuals of unknown strength levels who could have gotten here from the abyss, and exhausted, conflict-torn hunters who have been starving for a long time. Ordinary hunters below rank B. Then the hunters agreed with him, even if they do not believe in such a situation. They have no other choice. The main character said that there is no need to be so suspicious of your saviors. In any case, you are all from planet Earth. Randy calmly replied that they were all dead. The captain was very surprised how one person could cope with them. After that, Randy pointed his finger at the goblin who had transformed into a human. Randy said that he is a great magician, so the main character remembered the plan to return to Earth, which he shared with his allies in the Alliance. He recalled that they told him not to attract the attention of earthly constellations, to quietly expand the number of his supporters. Instead of attracting undue attention, he intends to cautiously explore the current situation on Earth. Hunter Gan asked that this was also a man who had disappeared into the abyss. Randy replied that yes, he has an even more tragic story than him, because he lost his memory. People began to feel sorry for him. The goblin could barely restrain himself from being rude to them. He thought to himself that these non-entities still felt sorry for him. Hunter Gang asked Randy if it turns out that he is also a magician because they could not cope alone. The main character smiled and said that he was not a magician. He used martial art. After these words, Randy noticed that all the hunters were simply stunned by his answer. After all, it was simply impossible for them to reach such a level with just martial arts. Gan could not believe his words. After all, he uses martial arts. This is the first time Gan has seen this. He wondered how long ago he fell into the abyss. The main character asked them why they were looking at him so strangely. The Gan replied that they were very surprised, and that they had not seen the martial arts master for a very long time. You are now % more involved in magic. Randy began to tell them that when he fell into the abyss, Martial arts masters were not held in high esteem. Randy asked what year it was. They answered him that it was. Then they realized that he had been in the abyss for years. Everyone looked at him like he was crazy. The record was years old, but this man is now in a mental hospital. It turns out Randy set a new record in the abyss. After this, Randy showed his fighting abilities. He threw a huge stone and smashed it into small pieces with one kick. Everyone had their mouths open in surprise, because it was their first time seeing something like this. Randy thought that apparently they really don't have martial arts masters there. He was upset that nothing had changed in years. They began to go outside, because the dungeon was designed in such a way that zombies were only ordinary monsters, but also a crowd that formed the boss. They wanted to take out all the monsters to clear the dungeon. Therefore, they had only one choice of being released. They must finish off all those remaining. One of the hunters asked the goblin in a human body. They believed that he was a ranked hunter who rebelled against Richard. They thought that he had lost his memory and began to feel sorry for him. Goblin thought that he would let them do what they wanted because the main character asked him to behave carefully, but for him it was very disgusting. Gan told Randy that it was difficult to find a strong hunter who could lead other high-ranking dungeons. Randy replied that he knew and asked why they were so polite. Gan replied that they are their saviors. Since he spent years in the abyss, they considered Randy an old man. Randy became very embarrassed because of his age. He asked them to take into account only his earthly age, years. He turned to the other hunters and said, "Even though Odaigon is a strong magician, why don't they come to me?" Randy was indignant. Gan said that this is because he is a martial artist. Randy was very upset that they did not respect the martial artist so much. Then he began to talk about a martial artist of rank A. It was Master Li. But the hunters were amazed by his words. They said that just when Randy fell into the abyss. Like Randy, were hunters who chose the path of martial arts, although it was believed that martial arts were inferior to magic. Most of these hunters went to China instead of their largest concentration. Although the martial artists were weaker, with the involvement of more students, the revival of the era of martial arts was possible. There was also a living legend who had reached the rank. Martial arts had a bright future, or so everyone thought. When no shocking news appeared on TV, that news was that Master Li was involved in a rank manipulation scandal. Similar scandals came to light in China, America, and other countries. With simple words, hunters bribed judges and changed their rank. S rank became B rank became a rank, and pretended to be heroes. Randy's reactions showed how surprised he was. Then Mr. Li was also considered a high-ranking hero in China. But in fact, he would have been ranked. After these words, Randy's world turned upside down. After all, for him, the master was simply an ideal. He even bought his photographs and posters. The hunter took him by the shoulder and said that after this scandal, the reputation of martial artists had suffered greatly. Many people have given up martial arts, in the sense that it is impossible to achieve a rank in this way. Captain said that no one uses martial arts now. After all, after the incident, this tradition disappeared. There are no more students and schools where martial arts are studied. Randy was in a panic. He did not understand how his idol could be so hungry about this. The main character tried to calm down, because the more he worried, the more his energy went away. Sadness would only cause muscle atrophy. Well, for the sake of being interested in one more question, he asked the hunters if everything was all right on Earth. But the hunters did not understand what he was asking. Randy decided to ask directly whether there had been a constellation invasion of planet Earth. One of the hunters approached Randy and said that he probably meant about the incident. The hunter thought that it was a real disaster. He asked Randy how he knew that this happened because Randy was in the abyss. Randy had already begun to worry greatly because while he was disappearing into the abyss, the prophecy of the goddess had come true. He hoped that he was not too late, and that everything was fine on Earth. Autumn of the year, when a case of rank manipulation was discovered. Things weren't as usual that day. All the people started looking at the sky. There was a big flash in the sky, and it scared the people very much. Fiery rays began to shoot at the ground. It was a real disaster for people. Many people were killed and wounded. It was a true army of killers, an army that had one goal, that followed orders and acted according to strategy. They had only one strategy, to take over the Earth and kill more souls of the Earthlings. The main characters grabbed the hunter by the shoulders and began to scream loudly. He asked him what happened next, what happened on Earth. Had the Earth really been taken over by evil constellations? Hunter Gan asked him to calm down. He said that they gave them a good rebuff. Randy could not believe what he heard. How ordinary people could fight back, because the constellations and avatars are very strong. Hunter said that there were a lot of casualties, but they were able to stop them and give them a good fight. All countries mobilized their best hunters who stopped the invasion. The guy fell to his knees from shock. He asked himself only one question. Then he didn't have to do anything else. He didn't understand why he was throwing himself into the abyss. He did not yet understand that the goddess's prophecy was not erroneous, or she had miscalculated. The constellation of nightmares joined this conversation. For her, it was very strange, because this was not just a small skirmish, but a full-fledged invasion of the constellations. Even if a mortal sent his forces, would it be possible to stop them at all? It's not just about different power levels. The constellation and the mortal are completely different. Even if there are many hunters, they are just like small insects to them. Randy agreed with the girl. It also seemed very strange to him. He asked them how people stopped the constellation. Gan replied that they didn't really stop them. It was more like a truce. They were not sure that they needed to expand the territory they occupied, and the people suffered too many losses if you tried to return the lost territories. But people were very worried whether the truce with these demons would continue. Well, strangely enough, it still continues. It was probably because of the constellations that promised to protect the Earth. The girl was sitting on the grass at that moment and understood everything. She said, if there were constellations here originally, then it makes sense. Even if new constellations take over the Earth, they can transfer their power to the avatars and force them to fight. Unlike Randy, Constellation rarely fight themselves, but against Randy, they will have to go out and fight in person. Then the main character understood why the truce lasted for so many years. The invasion of the constellations changed the hierarchy. This is what caused the connection of the abyss with the Earth. To avoid a full-scale war, a compromise was reached to restore the balance of power. Truce became possible because they either did not want to fight themselves or did not want to lose their avatars. Then Randy said that he had nothing to do here anyway. He spoke to stop the invasion of evil constellations. He went into the abyss but returned too late. The main character considered himself guilty for not being able to save people. Kitten from Lava said that this is all wrong, although they were a couple of decades late, but the situation was exhausted. Girl also said that the truce cannot last forever. There are so many other constellations in the abyss that may still decide to invade the Earth. This meant that if the situation worsened, the Earth would turn into a battlefield where the constellation would fight for dominance over the Earth. Odaigon noticed a living zombie and shot it with magic. Other hunters began to praise him and say that his magic was truly wonderful. Hunter said that he had never seen anyone use the magic of the first circle like that. But the goblin in the human body replied that this was just the magic of the first circle. The main character watched this from the side and understood that the goblin would not last long. It was obvious that they made him very angry. Nightmare Constellation told him to be careful. The view on Earth is not enough to simply hide the power of existence. After all, a great battle between the constellations could break out there. If Randy doesn't properly hide his identity, he could cause a big conflict. Randy understood this very well and said that he would be very careful. The main character asked the hunter what they do with the people who returned from the abyss. Hunter Hans said that they undergo a medical examination and are asked about their experience. Most of them were simply crazy. No one could withstand such a load on their brain. After the invasion, a new law came out on Earth. It was forbidden to become avatars of evil constellations. Randy understood their anger at the constellation because they came and destroyed their home. After the war, people became very strict. Anyway, the procedure is not that complicated. The hunter asked what country he was from. Randy replied that he was Korean. Hunter Gon said that he would have a new citizenship. Main character approached Odaigon and told him that he had received enough information about the situation on Earth. Randy wondered what the skill level of the hunters was. Then the code from Lava replied that there is a spell called level assessment. It shows the level and characteristics. This will be quite enough. But the main character could not use the power of the essence, because in this case, the constellation immediately noticed him. Well, he was told that for this spell, he would not need to use his power of the essence. They said that it was quite easy, and any constellation could do it. After that, the main character used the Eye of Sauron. After he looked at the captain, he immediately revealed his essence. If Randy masters this ability, who will be able to give out a lot more information? This was a skill Randy could also train. After a long journey, the dungeon was cleared. The joy on the faces of the hunters was very visible, because they wanted to quickly return home to Earth. Dungeon will close soon. Randy was very happy that he was finally heading to the ground. At this time, on the land of the Mojave Desert, Nevada, the group of hunters could not advance to the dungeon. A large storm appeared. It was clear that it was the storm that made the constellation. But out of this storm, Randy appeared with his friends. He looked at the sky and sighed deeply. Finally home, I told Randy. Dungeon is a mirror of demonic illusions that Hans's hunters cleared out in the Mojave. This is his final rank. It was C rank. The captain was very angry because he believed that he deserved better. He said that it was unfair because there were thousands of zombies there. He said that the rank of a dungeon is determined by the strength of the boss. They taught their number during testing, so he was given the rank of C and not F. Since the Ghoul King Tarun was not known on Earth, they did not suspect that they were able to survive in a dungeon. It turned out that the captain was from the royal family. He was called Prince Parker of the group. And at that moment, Randy was wondering why there were so many paparazzi there. Looks like his friend was a star. The goblin was quite surprised that this man was from the royal family, but you couldn't tell by his appearance. Randy, lying on the couch, said that a real king would not be happy with him. Even though Randy wasn't that good at English, they somehow understand what is written here. At this moment, Lava's kitten says that the eye of the constellation can see through lower entities. And he adds that it would be strange if the constellation could not understand the language of mortals. At this moment, the doctor comes in and says that the examination is absolutely ready. Randy turned out to be completely healthy. The doctor said that she had never seen such a perfect body. As if God himself had given Randy such a body, the doctor was very surprised. Randy's mental health also seemed to be great. Doctor said that she will have to undergo complex rehabilitation for years. If Randy wants, he can move to another country, and they will help him. He smiled affectionately and said that he would think about it. At that moment, a man approached the goblin in a human body and said that there was no need to worry if he had lost his memory. He promised that the American government would help him restore his memory. Well, the goblin answered them the same thing, that he refused and he would follow Mr. Randy. The journalist asked him what was happening in the abyss, why he became so attached to it. The guy laughed and answered how could he know, because when they met, he had already lost his memory. Randy was not going to tell the whole truth, and they decided to come up with such a deception. He did not want to reveal to people that he was a constellation. Journalists suspected that this happened because of the first person he met after losing his memory. A journalist asked Randy if he had ever thought about moving to another country. They persuaded him to move to America. They said that there is no better country for a hunter than America. But Randy was absolutely against it. He always answered that he would think about it. But he understood that he would never leave. 4 journalists began to whisper behind Randy's back. They were interested in learning more and more about him, because this is the first person who had been there for years. Goblin told Randy that with the help of his magic, he could easily eavesdrop on them. Randy agreed. He was interested in what they were discussing there. Randy heard what they were talking about. They wanted to force him to move to America. They had a plan to give him a lot of money and buy him an expensive house. They thought it would work. They wanted to send a spy to him so that other countries would not lure him to another country. "Can I get rid of them?" Goblin asked Randy, but Randy immediately calmed him down and said that there was no need to complicate life so much. R wanted to get a hunter's green card. To get this card, the returnee must go through many procedures. The professor told Randy that he would now change the amount of his mana. He asked to pour his mana into the crystal ball. When Randy did this, the crystal ball simply exploded. The professor could not believe his eyes, because he was seeing this for the first time. After the ball burst, the main character said that he still had a lot of mana left. Randy turned to the professor and said that he needed to improve his rank higher than years ago. Though crystal ball, created to measure mana, contains many times more mana than an ordinary hunter has. A lot of hunters could not cope with this ball. After all, when a hunter influences Manu into him, The color of the ball changes, indicating his rank. Randy said that he was not used to holding back, but he had his reasons for using all his strength. The girl realized that he did this on purpose. She was worried that he would not overdo it so that other constellations would not notice him. Because the Earth is different from the Abyss, it has its own rules. The main character could easily find strong opponents in the Abyss, but this is not possible on Earth. The main character wanted to quickly see what rank he received. He was very surprised when he saw that he was still of rank ES. He was even more surprised that on the card it was written that his age was, although Randy in the Abyss did not age a bit, he was still. The captain of the hunters approached them. He said that Randy saved his life. Now he must repay for it. He asked them if they should stay on Earth after years of absence. He wanted to shelter them in his home, and told them not to be shy and to stay as long as they wanted. They agreed. After all, they had no other choice. They got into a luxurious limousine and went home. R asked Richard when he was going to give away all his savings. Richard did not expect such a question. He could not understand what he was talking about. Randy smiled and said that he heard him say that he would give all the jewelry if anyone asked him. Well, it was all a joke. On the way home, there was an accident. The limousine crashed into a Lamborghini. Randy immediately began to worry. Perhaps the evil constellation found out about him that he was on Earth. But it is unlikely that the constellation would come alone to fight him alone. When they got out of the car, they saw a man with glasses. Randy and the goblin immediately felt that he was not like everyone else. He was an unusual person. It turned out to be a dragon. Richard immediately began to panic. It was clear that this was a famous person. Well, Randy didn't understand who he was and who he was. He approached Randy, did not tell him that he knew him. They had known him for a long time. Then Randy recognized him. It was his former boss who advised him in his endeavors. All Richard's guards were amazed because his boss had become a real star. He was called Dragon. After all, he was a high-ranking hunter. Then Randy heard from the guards that he was one of the strongest hunters on this earth, and he got married last week because it was his 19th marriage. He could not believe that his boss had grown so much in the knowledge of the hunter. Randy recalled how he tried to persuade him not to go with monsters of a rank beyond their strength. Fast forward to when an invasion of evil constellations simultaneously occurred throughout the world. In those days, they were called the Disaster of Soul. Every hunter fought against monsters, and the head of the invincible Hwang clan was also among them. Thanks to the efforts of such hunters, South Korea was able to resist the invasion. After this incident, they were called heroes. The government also called them heroes to the whole world, but they received nothing but a title. And after this incident, he moved from Korea to America. After all, hunters there were treated much better and paid more. He got good support, caught a few monsters, started a company, and appeared on TV a couple of times. And that's how he turned out to be a superstar. The boss said that Randy had not changed a bit. He was still taciturn. He remembered the letter that Randy left before going into the Abyss, and after that he disappeared for years. Some people started saying that Randy had died and his death should be reported. Because before this, no one had ever returned from the Abyss. As boss said, they even held a memorial ceremony in Randy's honor. They were very surprised when they saw his name on the list of those who returned from the Abyss. After that, the boss turned to Richard and asked him why they were driving in his car. Richard replied that he just wanted to pay him for saving his life. The boss took him affectionately by the head and said that he thought that he was taking them to some estate to tear them into pieces or something like that. Well, just think what a grateful reason. Randy looked around at the city, and it was clear that years had passed because a lot of cars were flying. This city was Los Angeles. After the appearance of his brother, hunters arrived here, thirsting for fortune and glory. Clans of these hunters, hunters who want to become part of such clans, and those who want to do business with hunters. This place turned into a city of hunters, and when the boss arrived in the States, he asked to immediately report to him who returned from the Abyss. If they missed even one, he would move to another country. Randy looked out the window and saw that there were a lot of people on the street. He wondered why there were so many of them here. The boss said that they were waiting for their turn, to meet him. Randy didn't understand why they would do this. He said that people wanted to ask him for a chance, and said that he would explain this to Randy later. Randy was very surprised when he saw that there was a panda in his house. The boss said that he received them from the Chinese government. One of his employees thought that this was too much, but the boss did not stand on ceremony with him. He asked his name and then fired him. When Randy saw this, He was shocked. He said that his boss had turned into a shitty person. The boss asked why. Randy didn't understand how you could fire a person for just one mistake. But the boss did not agree with him, because he paid him a lot of money. After that, the boss called his secretary. He asked how long he had been working here and how much he had earned. The secretary replied that he had been working here for weeks and earned $1. But Randy still disagreed with him. He said that in this way the salary did not apply. After all, he treated them badly. The boss said that he warned them when he hired them because they receive the highest salary. If they make a mistake, he fires them immediately. Randy said that to Hyung, as the former head of his clan, he should be a role model. One of the boss's assistants briefly spoke about the events on Earth, what has happened over the past years. She talked for more than minutes. Then Randy learned that evil constellations had taken over China, Northern Korea, Central Europe, and South America, and also Mexico. After all, the invasion of evil constellations in Northern Asia, it was May and South Korea, where Randy was born, was not occupied. After all, it was one of the countries that coped well with the invasion. However, after this, many Koreans left the country. Their immigration played into America's hands. Randy was wondering what his boss went through. After all, before, women always despised him, and he hesitated to go to the Dungeon B rank. Well, having lived 2 years and having marriages, he became a ranked dragon and is swimming in money. Then Lava Kitten suggested that Randy make him his avatar. But he doubted it because he didn't really trust this boss. Randy began to think about how he would tell him this, because it looked very strange. Randy believed that if he explained well, the boss would be able to understand him. But the main character decided that he would try to take him into avatars. Vitya, the head of the clan, did not give up and searched for him for all years. Randy read it as a reliable person. Therefore, he did not really want the boss to be involved in the affairs of the constellations. The next day, she and her boss went to the gaming training room. After that, the boss used magic. The Lava Kitten was very surprised. And he says that this is the magic of the other side of the world. Because this magic is popular among the constellations, mortals do not know how to use it. Boss said that on the other side of the world, if Randy had been wounded in battle, then nothing would have happened to him in real life. It's like a game with incredible immersion. Constellation used such magic to train its avatars. Randy asked the boss where he learned about this magic. Randy believed that he learned it from the constellation, but the boss replied that this is a very common magic. Then the boss thought about it and said that perhaps the constellation was taught to someone. The main character was very surprised, because such a military training ground, earthly hunters were very well prepared. Well, the boss corrected him right away. He says that this site is more for sports. Many hunters appeared on the hologram. It was called Hunting Sport. They were called the 6-Star League, a game in which 6 hunters fight against another team. Of course, in this game there are many rules. Killing monsters, time attack, and death fights. R wanted to try this game. The program asked Randy to limit the power. Otherwise, the other side of the world may collapse. Randy realized that this is human magic, and it is not strong enough for the constellations. Randy was surprised because after they limited his strength, he had the feeling that something heavy was attached to him. Guy realized that his essence power was increasing, while he was fighting with limited forces on the other side of the world. Kitten said that this was a good opportunity. Other constellations cannot observe him when he is underground on the other side of the world. However, he could still use the essence's power if he wished. But Randy still wasn't sure whether he should reveal his Hyung and make him his avatar, because as Randy said earlier, he doesn't want to interfere with someone's peaceful fate. And directing avatars from the very beginning is not Randy's style. Kitten said if he fights with a constellation, the time will come when he will need avatars. After all, it's quite rare for a constellation to fight alone. Randy said that thanks to the magic of the other side of the world, hunter training looks much more realistic. But the boss again said that this was not a training session. Is a sport that is the best and most popular sport on Earth. Then Randy realized that they were doing this not to train, but for fun. This sport originated from competitions where hunters fight one-on-one. Most people love this sport. R was confused. After all, before he only thought about the crisis on Earth. He trained all the time and was worried that he wouldn't make it in time. I was worried and continued to look for a way back. Then Randy said that the hunters on Earth became sports stars. Well, then the kitten said that the raid must learn. The constellation is known both SSL and WCHO Cho. Randy Moss doesn't understand this because he didn't have avatars, but for constellations with avatars, it's like a proxy war. Probably the spread of magic, the other side of the world on Earth, somehow mediated by wars. Then Randy had an idea. If they do this, perhaps they spread the magic on purpose, in order to find new avatars. And thanks to this game, very few hunters go into the dungeon. Then Randy asked the boss why people become hunters since they don't go into the dungeon. The boss immediately replied that it was for the sake of money and fame. If a person likes some sport, he can try it. With little success, he will earn more money than he can ever spend. Everyone lined up in front of the boss's house wanted an opportunity. Then the boss said stop talking and asked Randy why he went to the abyss. He believed that he had been deceived. Then Randy said that before he explains everything, he wants to ask the boss a favor. Randy asked him to raise the power limit of magic from the other side of the world. After all, he was tired of the restriction. Then boss shouted that this was a room for hunters of rank A. Randy replied that he had rank C+. His skills could not be properly appreciated. Randy said that he broke the measuring device. But this was not enough for his rank to be raised. The boss was shocked by what he heard. He noticed how Randy had changed a lot. Boss said that they were bribed, and he will help establish justice. The boss noticed that Randy was uncomfortable. He realized that Randy had become really strong. Then Randy told him the whole truth why he went to the abyss. He said that he went there to protect the Earth. After that, Randy told him the whole story about his journey in the abyss. Then the boss realized that he had been wandering around and became a constellation, and now he had returned here to protect the Earth. Boss came up to him and started saying that he wouldn't believe it. He read that it is impossible for a person to become a constellation. Then Randy said that he would prove everything to him and show him what he was capable of. Then the boss realized that for this, Randy asked to raise the power limit here. Then Hyung was going to have a combat sparring with Randy. He was interested in what he was capable of. The boss was quite weak because upon death he received a rank A skill and activated leveling up through death. The boss jumped up and was about to attack Randy. Randy noticed that tattoos were beginning to appear on his body. They were called artifact tattoos. But Randy was calm. There was no need for him to shy away. He concentrated a small amount of energy into just one finger. This beam flew past his head. The main character did this on purpose so as not to kill his comrade. Then the boss realized that he was not weak, but he did not yet realize the full strength of Randy. He understood that he needed to force the opponent to focus on defense by attacking before them. Then the boss used the magic technique of the sixth circle, the path of lava. Lava appeared around him. Randy was surprised by his skills and asked him when he managed to learn this. But the boss believed that he was looking down on him and did not want to put him in his place. Then he made a direct attack and attacked him head-on, shooting him with a red beam. Randy noticed that he was using the magic of the sixth circle once again. Then Randy used his protective screen technique. The boss's attack didn't even come close to breaking through Randy's shield. There was a big difference in power class. Then the boss shouted something skill in China and a false rumor began to spread. Randy asked him what he meant. The boss replied that there are viral fake videos with similar skills to Randy. The main character then remembered his idol, the master. He had not yet completely recovered from the fact that his idol was a deceiver and a swindler. Randy looked at his hand and noticed that he had little energy left after the first use of the energy shield. I suppose this could no longer be avoided since the Randy's power was limited. Randy needed to control his power so as not to destroy the reverse world. It's been a long time since he fought as a human. Then the main character promised himself that he would achieve maximum efficiency. He began to control his energy into one small ball. He concentrated this ball in one hand and threw it at the boss. The boss understood that things were bad, and he did not have enough speed to evade. Then he used the fast teleportation technique, but he did not have time to teleport. His magic was destroyed by a powerful aura. The boss took damage from the hit. He was very surprised by Randy's strength. He did not understand how his skill could be used so quickly. After this, Hyung decided to strengthen his body with magic. His body began to be covered with pink lightning. But Randy was too fast for him. He grabbed his right hand and threw him to the ground. Then Randy told him, "Are you really trying to switch to close combat against someone who uses martial arts?" He immediately began to come up with excuses for himself. He said that he was confused because he had never fought with martial arts masters. After the fight ended, Hyung held his right hand and said that Randy had reached the highest level in martial arts. Randy told him that he had surpassed this level. After all, he has the highest level. And if you take it one step further, you can go beyond the boundaries of mortality. Then Hyung completely believed that he was a constellation. After all, he thought that it was very absurd on his part. Then he asked him what Randy wanted from him. Randy said that initially he wanted to ask for help. After that, he began his explanation. Although the constellation agrees to a truce, the agreement is only temporary. After all, new constellations can emerge from the abyss at any time, and the constellation currently in a state of truce. Perhaps they are plotting to take over the land behind our backs. After all, the other constellations already have many servants on Earth, and they are well known. On the other hand, Randy needed to start from scratch, so he considered this a bad proposition. All answered that the youngest of the clan defended the land to the abyss for years, and he tried to act cool because he was older. After that, Hyung hit the ground with his fist and said that he would worry about Randy. Then he asked him what he meant when he said that he was not going to ask for his help. Randy said that Hyung lives his own life, and that's why he doesn't want to drag him into such troubles. He became angry at such words. He shouted that he would help him, and now he is in a bad position not to accept his help. Hyung didn't want a person he knew to be drawn into a battle between the constellations, but he understood that Randy would not back down. The next day, they sat in a cafe and discussed the future from Earth. Hyun said that in his entire life, he would never have thought that he would enter into an agreement with a constellation. He understood that he would serve under the constellation. It means selling them your soul. Hyung asked Randy, if he makes this agreement, won't his clan's every move be monitored? Randy replied that he wouldn't do it if he wanted to. Randy thought about a plan. The plan was to first hide the fact that he was a constellation. Then the Hyung realized that he had to hide his strength, like the constellation, so that they would not be burned. R said that anyway. He is going to continue to increase the number of servants while hiding the fact that he is a constellation. He said that he would need servants when he encountered other constellations. Hyungs were already preparing themselves for the battle. He was not at all afraid of how difficult the battle would be, even if this battle was against a constellation. Randy said that the magic that is often used in sports is called an alternative universe. It is also used by constellation. After all, it was quite strange that people participating in hunting competitions used this magic. The reason why this magic is so widespread is due to the fact that the constellation fights in a similar way. After all, the servants of the constellations are sent to fight each other. After all, there is a high probability that the constellation intended to make it a hunter competition, as it became easier for them to choose servants based on their level of efficiency. But the goblin did not agree with Randy. He believed that this was speculation. He did not believe that the constellation could look at such nonsense. Even now, most of the constellations are in agony of boredom. In any case, the Hyung understood that if the meadow had to be fought, like in the hunter competitions on Earth, this could be a big advantage for him because he had participated in similar battles. Hyung said that he understood what he was talking about. Randy should have become famous as a hunter. He must become the strongest hunter. After all, when an A-class dungeon opens, these are the types of hunters that the country's government will beg for help. Despite the fact that people claim that their strange hunter is the strongest, they know very well, deep down in their souls, which hunter is the strongest. Then, and he said that he understood everything and thought that Randy certainly had the necessary abilities, but the problem is how they will show them to the world. Hyung said that he knows how many groups he is responsible for, and it is not just one clan. All cores and dungeon items were purchased by the company, as well as additional support with bonuses and so on. As long as Hyun's servants prove their loyalty, they will reward you generously, which is why people want to get into this clan all the time. Well, Randy didn't understand why he was telling him to join the clan, if he can do it without it. Then Hyung slammed his fist hard on the table and shouted that Randy wanted to hide the fact that he was a constellation. He needed to hide his power properly. Randy said that he was right, but Randy decided to limit his power to the maximum level. So as long as he can control his energy, then everything should be fine. Hyung said that he would send him to the clan, as it accepts the best candidates, so he could look for a few nuggets there. After all, Randy could take them as servants if they proved that they were useful enough. Randy agreed and said it was a good idea. Well, Randy was afraid that they would be against it, because few people like hunters who use martial arts. Hyun also agreed that they wouldn't like it at all. After all, once they reach Class A, they will become strategic weapons that will rule the state. Only those who have achieved high results can be recognized as S-Class. If you think about it like that, it's just amazing. After all, less than people around the world have been awarded this title. Hyung pointed his finger at Randy and said that he already wants to start quickly and do everything he can. They were going to go to the qualifying round. This qualifying round was called Uis. Hyung said that a lot of hunters will come to participate, and Randy needs to go through this qualifying round and win in order to be accepted as a professional in the league. He advised me to go to the preliminary round in a week, and for now, he will get used to it here. Then his Hyung gave him a smartphone, because a lot has changed over the past years. Randy picked up a smartphone and couldn't figure out how to use it. Randy passed near the arena. The arena was very large and had a blue ball at the top. Randy immediately realized that this was a new qualifying round. At that time, one of the hunters came out near them. He was in a gold sports car. Randy realized that the hunters had not changed at all. He wondered whether the person who won the tournament would become a professional. One of the guards said that these are qualifying rounds for the S-Class League. Well, there will also be a lot of D and E-Class hunters here. After all, they always have other options, so he asked Randy not to worry and to consider this as a learning experience. The guard didn't yet know Randy's full strength. At this time, Odaigan was having fun on his phone and playing games. He was interested in learning what this thing was. Randy said that he stopped playing these games. He said that he would be back soon. He needed to look at the building. Randy hours head, because I understood that it would take all day. He was interested in competing with other hunters. The main character entered the tournament room of the hall. There were a lot of journalists, people from television and YouTubers. Rand entered the center of the building. He entered the virtual world. He understood that he had to keep his power under control, or the virtual world would be destroyed. The main character began to concentrate his energy in his hands. He understood that after a while his first battle would begin. He did not need to overdo it, so that his opponent would remain alive. He successfully entered the virtual world. His strength and agility were limited. Randy hoped to use the fist of energy within certain limits. If he fights in the virtual world with limited strength, then his existential strength will increase, and then he could use various other techniques. But Randy was in anticipation. The harder it was for him, the more his strength increased. And it worked well. His opponent was twice his physical size. It was clear that he was very aggressive against him, and he was ready to trample Randy in battle. His opponent said that he would destroy him. He had to run away so that he would not kill him. At this moment, the referee intervened and shouted that they would be disqualified if the fight began before the whistle. His opponent learned that his opponent was a martial artist. He was a little surprised because it was his first time fighting against a martial artist. He always fought only against magicians. His opponent immediately came up with a plan for the fight. He was going to keep the distance between them, use the magic of the second circle of floating, and then use the enhancement of the magic missile. He hoped that Randy didn't know that he had passive guided missiles. The fight had just begun when Randy's fist was already near his opponent's face. It was clear that Randy was faster than him, and he hit him hard in the face. The blow was so strong that he flew meters away. Spectators were simply shocked, because it was very fast and very powerful. They didn't expect Randy to win. Matches were completed. Randy won after seconds of the fight. Randy thought it would be much harder. He was very disappointed in his opponent. Judges raised Randy's hand, and his opponent was carried out on the flooring. It was a good day for him. When Randy was drinking a cup of tea and relaxing in his dressing room, a man approached him and wanted to tell him important things. He said that Randy is very different from today's hunters, and he was very impressed with him. Man said that most hunters last year couldn't hold a candle to Randy. After all, in a real battle, you cannot call them hunters. Randy answered him that at first he also thought so, but now it seems to him that not everything is so bad. After all, what difference does it make where to train if the strength in the end is the same? Then the man asked Randy if he knew why he was here. Randy replied that he was a scout and came to lure him into his team. The man replied that he was absolutely right and wanted to ask Randy to join the Ambitus clan. But the man stood his ground. He said that because of this, it must be difficult for Randy to navigate the situation, that he is overcome by anxiety about what to do next and which team to join. But he didn't even have to worry about that. After all, their plan promised to help completely. They promised that they would guarantee a share for 1.5 people with a percentage ratio in raids. The man also promised that he would provide enormous support, and he would be personally taught magic by top-level hunters. But the main character was against it, because he was only used to martial arts. The man did not understand what to tell him next. He said that Randy would be able to go into the dungeon together and ensure growth, thereby acquiring new skills. But Randy smiled kindly, and he said that he would look for a clan with martial arts users. The man said that he in no way wanted to downplay his potential, but he thought that Randy was still a high-ranking hunter. Raising your rank is not such a simple matter. Man said that Randy would regret this because their clan is the best. Randy asked for what reason he would regret it. He was interested in how much they would pay him, and why they decided to come to him right away because he had only fought the first fight. The man said that this is the strength of their clan. He said that this is courage. Well, Randy thought it was more likely some kind of trick than courage. The man waved his arms and asked anxiously what trick. Randy said that, for example, this man got some information about him in advance. This has often been done in the past. The main one kept the novice hunters for themselves by bribing the appraiser. At this time, the secretary came in and told Randy to get ready for the next fight. The man said that he would also support him in the next fight. Randy was warming up and thinking about how he would fight his next opponent. He didn't want to reveal his full strength yet. To begin with, Randy decided to show what rank B is capable of. His fists were already itching to fight. Before he entered, Randy decided to invest % of his internal energy speed force and limited the power of martial arts. His true strength is constantly growing, but his speed is too slow. Lava Kitten thinks this is nonsense and asks what speed he wants. He said that a good solution would be to recruit avatars and prepare a constellation temple, or it is worth increasing the number of believers. We'll almost have already begun. The judge spread his arms and told the rules of the competition. Randy decided to check its level using his eye. He saw the essence of his rival. His level was strength, agility, endurance, mana, intelligence. The opponent's name was Gregory Martinez. He is close to C rank, specializes in close combat. Only Randy did not understand why he needed a bow in close combat. The battle began. Martinez immediately took out his bow and began to shoot. Well, while he was raising his bow, Randy was already under him and hit Martinez. His opponent flew meters away from the blow. Martinez will be filmed to understand where he got such speed. Martinez got angry and began to accumulate energy. His mother was red. He decided to immediately start with melee trump cards. He attacked Randy with his strong attack. This attack was called 1,000 Fists. All the spectators of the fight were in shock. They believed that after this technique, Randy would end. After all, this technique is the shahs of a martial arts user. But close combat with Martinez is very dangerous. But it didn't work for Randy. He hit Martinez and he flew to the very edge of the arena. Journalists believed that he was a real monster, because he had already defeated 2 hunters with just 1 blow. The man said that he had to sign a contract with Randy in any way. One of the men said that if you think about it, he ended all the fights with 1 blow. Another man added that this is so, because these are qualifying rounds with P rank, but it's still not often that you see all fights ending with 1 blow. Randy began to be shown on TV. It became a real discovery. Everyone was talking about it. One of the journalists said that Randy was very good, but he read that he was not the strongest hunter on planet Earth. After all, among the participants, there are much stronger hunters than him. He believed that the hunter Eugene was much stronger. He specializes in one-on-one combat. Therefore, he does not go on raids, but acts exclusively against people. Main characters continued to beat their rivals one by one. Even Eugene lost to him, although he was considered a real rival for Randy. Viewers thought that Randy was just crazy in the good sense of the word, because they had never seen a hunter defeat so easily, not even Eugene. It was time for the finals. His opponent's name was Laurels. He was from the Rainbow Clan. He believed that the Randy's movements were obvious, and it would be an easy victory for him. Well, his opponent lost literally in personal seconds. After all, he could not block his blows because they were very powerful and fast. The judge raised Randy's hand and said that this is the winner of the qualifying round from the rank. Randy looked up at this time and thought that it was complete ease for him. People couldn't believe that a martial arts user defeated the magicians. For them, it was beyond intelligence. He practiced fighting in song alone for about years. His level allows him to determine the enemy's tactics only by his breathing. Even hunters considered specialists in single battles were a mere trifle for Randy. The main character stood on the pedestal and raised the cup up. But for him, it was just a small thing. Randy walked along the red carpet. Everyone immediately surrounded him and started asking a lot of questions and taking pictures. Randy wanted to lure his rivals to his side by any means necessary, but he noticed these glances. They looked at him in a bad way. However, even in the qualifying round from a rank, well, the victory over all the participants was a significant event. In the eyes of the constellations, Randy began to look like a real treasure. Randy understood that he was burned. He had to hide his strength, but it was quite difficult. One of the constellations is red. It was clear from his face that he was very serious. He warned Randy not to interfere in their affairs. Lava and Magma Kitten says that the contract for the Avatar has nothing to do with the agreement, so he can do whatever he wants. A warrior shrouded in madness and blood warns that he can attack the constellation at any time without an agreement. There was a big squabble between the constellation and the Magma Kitten, also a constellation. Even if it's just messaging, the pressure is just killer. The kitten answered the warriors with such confidence because no one knew where his territory was. Warrior shrouded in madness and blood. He warns that he will never forget about it, and he announces that he will take revenge for all his avatars. Constellation of Madness replied to Randy that he did not understand what he was talking about. After all, he did not know that the inevitable punishment awaits all arrogant mortals. Randy replied that the Constellation of Madness could not even commit outrages in front of other constellations, but still called himself a warrior, shrouded in madness and blood. Randy repeated once again that he was not going to sign a contract with him and asked him to get out of here. Constellation of Madness left and promised to take revenge on him. Other constellations were amazed by Randy's courage, such as the glory-pursuing Monk constellation and the Sweat and Blood Fighter constellation. Randy said that he doesn't know, as for the rest of the mortals, well, he will ever enter into battle with this constellation. Lava and Magma Kitten, impressed by the mortal's response, gave him soul fragments. The rest of the constellations interrupt in shock. Randy asked him what he was doing, and did not understand why the kitten was doing this. Lava and Magma Kitten whispers in his ear that this is part of the strategy, and he needs to accept it. Soul fragments among the constellations serve as currency. Now the Lava and Magma Kitten gave them to Randy on purpose, to provoke other constellations. On the one hand, Randy needed these crystals so that other constellations would look down on him. Randy thought that until this moment he only cared about strength, because he didn't even think about such things. In any case, he thanked Lava's Kitten for this. Lava's Kitten said that he was making an important statement. After all, he was a little surprised that Randy realized it only now. Hyun's servant comes. He bows to him and says that he didn't succeed. Hyung was furious, and he told them to catch this damn appraiser alive. But at the moment, an investigation was underway to catch him. He grabbed his head and shouted what clan this bastard is from. After all, he could assume that the Imbitus clan was involved here. Clan Imbitus, although considered an influential clan, cannot be compared. After all, an influential clan is empowered by the government itself, while the Imbitus clan is just a newcomer that is just beginning to gain strength. Everyone began to wonder what this clan was planning against them. After all, they knew that in their current situation it was dangerous to deal with them, and there was a very clear provocation. He thought that the clan was Imbitus, to enlist the support of another influential clan that was trying to oppress them. At this moment, a girl comes in and tells the Hyung that the results of the qualifying round are already known. She said that Hunter Randy won the qualifiers. The man bowed and said that he would immediately call the appraiser to assign a new rank, and if problems arise, he will take full responsibility. Hyung said that he thought correctly. He was very glad to hear what he liked. The next day, the rank evaluator came and said that Randy had a B rank. Hyung did not agree with him. He said that this appraiser is blind, and he should be given a higher rank. But the evaluator did not agree with him and said that he gave him a decent rank, and besides, he knew what martial arts users do in real combat. The man almost attacked the appraiser after these words, but Randy stopped him. He told his Hyung not to disgrace him. Then the main character whispered in his ear that he needed to be careful because the constellation began to show great interest in him, and there is nothing wrong with moving slowly. Then the Hyung calmed down a little. He scratched his head and said that in any case, B rank is also good. Hyung said that he wanted to push him into the Irakos clan. Well, if he had a rank in that regard, they would look down on him. Randy said that martial arts users, even with B rank, would be ignored. Then the Hyung hit Randy on the back and said that it was absolutely not important. In the end, they knew that Randy was thousands of times stronger than them, and he would show what he was like. Hyung reached for his bag and said that there was one good weapon in his collection, and he decided to give it to Randy, but Randy didn't understand why he needed a weapon. Randy said that he didn't even know what he would give him. Hyung said that he would look much cooler this way. He took out a very beautiful sword. It was clear that this sword was very sharp. It was called the Sacred Moon Sword. His durability was, and his attack power was, he could use skills that burned with a sense of revenge, and the restoration of mana after killing an enemy. R said it was much better than he expected. Well, isn't this a Chinese artifact of high rank? Hyun replied that it was given to him in China. Randy said that this is what all thieves say. Well, Hyung immediately denied this and said that he was telling the truth, that the Chinese government gave it as payment for help. Well, Randy still didn't believe that this was a rank weapon. At that time, China, due to the invasion of evil constellations in the north, was on the verge of destruction. I also discovered several extremely problematic dungeons, and 3 A-rank monsters burst out from there. The first monster is Ubume, the second monster is King Mehu, and the third monster is Baiji. Then the Hyung went to help and received this gift. These 3 animals gave him strength. Then the Hyung said that they should forget about it, because he wanted to introduce Randy to the manager. He said that he already has a daughter. Randy couldn't believe it. He thought that it turned out that his daughter was his niece, although they were about the same age due to the fact that Randy had been in the abyss for years. The next day, Randy cooked a delicious steak for the girl. He really enjoyed cooking. She immediately realized that this dish was her favorite. It was Texas barbecue, brisket. Hefty pieces of meat are marinated with seasonings and then smoked for a very long time. However, this spiced brisket tasted much better. The girl's name was Ain. Randy said that the secret of taste lies in magic. After all, in fact, there is a special magical taste that cannot be compared with other tastes and aftertastes. Unlike the dishes, the meat that was given to the Aina was full of magic. Randy goblins looked at her and whispered because they did not understand what was happening to her. Suddenly, she jumped out of her chair and said that Randy should become a cook because it's very tasty. She suggested that Randy open a restaurant and the girl would become his investor. Randy was confused and said he liked Korean food better. When there was no more food, the girl suggested that they should get back to business, and she said that she would be Randy's manager, and she asked if he knew her duties. Randy replied that it was like controlling the schedule and movements, but the girl said that the first-class manager is a little different. Girl said that she knows what abilities a hunter has, what is needed to make him stronger. Analyzing all this is part of her responsibilities as first-class managers. The girl said that she is top class, and that she likes how Randy confidently conducts his fights. And she thought with her dad Hyung that they needed a real team for raids. After that, the girl stood up from the table and said that Randy was very uninformed. I know that the government gave this garden to a rich deputy. After all, this is how our world is now, the girl said. She went to the window and said that the Ikoros clan was very full of psychos, but their abilities are well matched by the pay they receive. If Randy was going to join her, then he had to undergo training to meet them. After that, the girl gave her number if Randy needed him to call. After the girl walked out the door, she thought, as her father Hyung said, that he looked too normal for someone who had returned from the abyss, and he had very enormous self-confidence. She wanted to teach him so that he could resist magic users. After all, he will soon have to face monsters from the B-rank league. Well, the girl didn't know what Randy was capable of. The next day, Randy and the goblin were working out in the rocking chair. The goblin said that if he was someone from the clan, he would immediately destroy them. After that, Randy wanted to do a test. He closed his eyes and concentrated on meditation. This meditation allowed me to connect to the broadcast of the constellations, in order to study in advance the countless constellations that we will encounter in the future. At this moment, Randy, which was the constellation of the invincible training master. I wanted to challenge any constellation to battle. Well, not one constellation decided to fight with him. Everyone ignored him. Lava and Magma Kitten says that only the constellation is responding, not at the same level. Constellation battle is when two constellations choose an avatar and compete. The loser pays the appropriate price. Of course, they must be at the same level. But no one knows the name of the training master. There is no reason to take the fight from the constellations, what to take. The main character scratched his head and said that he had no choice but to declare himself and recruit avatars. Then Randy wondered why even here there is no news about the virtuous goddess of the scales. Randy began to worry about her. Maybe something might happen to her. The next morning, this is the training base of the Icaros clan. Manager said that there are individual training rooms and dormitories here. Plus, he also added that everyone has their own set of abilities and everyone trains differently. Either way, he let them know if they needed it. Then Randy said that he would go to the training room and asked where the goblin would be at this time. Well, the goblin had something to do. He showed a toy with which he would play. This game was called Golden Escape. The goblin really liked it. Then the main character realized that he was specifically hooked on this game but didn't pay much attention to it. And I wanted to quickly start training with muscle strength. Randy just entered the hall and saw a very pumped-up girl in front of him. Girl at that moment was doing bench press exercises, and she had an incredible weight on the barbell. Randy came closer and noticed that this barbell weighed about tons. He realized that this was a very strong melee hunter. The girl noticed him and asked the guy if he had anything to do with her, because she was seeing him for the first time. Randy smiled and said that he was amazed at how the girl trains. The girl smiled that she was very pleased for such a compliment. She greeted the guy and said her name was Beth. When they shook hands, the girl tore her hand away with fear. She was shocked, because for the first time she saw a person who was stronger than her. Then she realized that he was also a melee magician. Norm said that he is a martial arts user. These are completely different things. Randy asked her if she was surprised. Beth said yes, she wouldn't be surprised here, because she didn't expect to meet rank B martial arts users. She wondered where Randy trained. The main character wondered whether he was telling her how it really was, because she was unlikely to believe him that he had been in the abyss for years. The girl realized that martial arts are not so useless. After all, she thought that she was able to absorb everything that could be used. The girl was very determined, and she said that she was ready to learn any sport. She showed her fighting techniques to her Renda. Randy was quite surprised. Freddie said that she could fight back against zombies and monsters. Bet said that she is in the ranked league and is in 19th place there. But this was the first time Randy had heard about this league. The girl wanted to test the guy what he was capable of. She told him to follow him. They came to the training hunters. It was quite large. A white-haired guy was waiting for them there. He was training at that time and was holding a pear. He asked the girl who the guy next to her was. The girl pointed at him with her hand and said that he was a beginner, a martial arts user. He said his name was Anthony, but he thought they would recognize Randy because he is a popular person. Well, Randy said it was his first time seeing him. Anthony began to say that he had cleared a dungeon called the Siege of Okarash, and he set a new record for night forays, and in the shortest possible time rose to rank B. The girl said that he had returned from the abyss and could not know about him in any way. Then Anthony said that nothing could be done about it, and said that he was the ruler of the clan. He invited Randy to his clan and said that he must obey him, and then all problems will be solvable. Randy asked the girl if Anthony was a psychopath because his behavior was very strange. The girl told him to leave this situation because he is always like this. They entered the ring and were ready to fight. Randy noticed that the girls were eager to go into battle, and he wanted to teach her one thing, so that she should not come close to the martial artist. He attacked her with a very fast attack, but the girl managed to block the blow with her sword. Then Ben started fighting very seriously. She then realized that martial arts are very dangerous. Randy was surprised that she managed to block his blow. He immediately realized that she had an excellent reaction. The main character pinned her in a corner and attacked with powerful and fast blows. After all, he read that no matter how fast the magic is, the girl still yields to the blows of a martial arts user. Ben decided to simply season the blow with magical power. She practically hit Randy. It was clear that Randy was very surprised. After all, no one had given him such a rebuff. The main character realized that she is a very good fighter, and she has a pretty good attack speed for a magic user. Randy immediately wanted to recruit her into Avatar. The girl wanted to use protective energy. She concentrated a lot of mana in her right hand, but Randy just hit her in the stomach. For him, it was an ordinary weak blow. He didn't want to overdo it in case he accidentally hurt her. Ben lay on her knees and asked how his blow went, because she was sure that she activated magic. Randy replied that he used a different force to strike. This is different from strengthening muscles with magic. But the girl did not want to give up and decided to attack again. The main character began to simply play with her. It was clear that she no longer had the strength to continue the fight. He wanted to demonstrate his abilities so that he could recruit this girl into the avatars. But Randy very much doubted that she would agree the first time. The main character looked at her face and thought that he had gone too far with his attacks, but the main character attacked her one more time and she fell to the ground. Then Randy asked her, maybe that's enough. The girl said that he really has good fighting strength, but she wanted to fight him again. The guy asked her, you're not going to fight until victory, because she chose the wrong opponent. But the girl, even though she could barely stand, wanted to continue this fight. The main character began to flex his fists because he liked such perseverance. Other people who were in that gym watched this fight with their mouths open. It was already a pity to look at the girl. Her whole face looked like one tomato, and she said that she was done for today. Well, Randy got excited. He started telling her that she was showing weak character. After all, now the most interesting things will begin. But the girl screamed to be saved from this psycho. Ben was lying on the sofa, and she did not have enough strength to get up. She said that she had never been so tired in sparring. Randy said that this training was not enough for him, and he asked the girl if she was interested in martial arts. Bet said not at all, because with her own strength she was sure that she would defeat Randy, and I promised myself that I would train more and become stronger. Randy said that with the help of martial arts, she could remove the flaws. But the girl didn't want to hear about it because it was a matter of pride. She pointed her finger at him and said that pride did not allow him to learn from the enemy. And from that moment on, she considered Randy her enemy. It goes without saying that when they meet, they will greet each other, but she will no longer accept help from him. Randy's face showed how surprised he was by this conversation. After these words, the girl simply turned around and went about her business. Magma and Lava Kittens say they should take better care of their opponent. But Randy did not agree, because losing on purpose would be humiliating. The next day, Ikaros training. It was a training hall inside the imagination. Randy met his old friend Richard there. Richard was glad to see them, the main character asked him. He is also joining the Ikaros clan. Richard smiled and said that this was the situation. Randy was a little surprised, because Richard was from a rich family, and it was strange that their family did not have a clan. When everyone had gathered, the clan mentor came. He was a hunter of a rank. His name was Ernest. He said that he hoped that he would find good hunters in his clan. Then Ernest asked the guys what the main weapon a hunter has against a monster. Replied that he himself is the main weapon, and that was the right answer. After all, the power of unshakable self-belief, without it nothing would have happened. Thanks to faith, which can become stronger, Randy also lasted a long time in the abyss. One of the hunters approached Ernest and said that last year he said generally different things. Ernest answered him that believing in yourself is also considered the right answer, and his faith is sincere. Richard replied that this is teamwork, and this was also the correct answer, because a hunter's weapon is capable of repelling monsters, non-magicians, and not objects. The most powerful weapon is unity. Even a high-ranking hunter will not venture into the dungeon alone. Ernest concentrated mana in his hand and said, even if he were awakened or had a high rank, people are by nature weaker than monsters. After all, no one knows what can happen in the dungeon. Therefore, you need to be prepared for anything. Then Ernest raised his right hand up and distributed his power to the other participants. Today there was a pair training. Randy at that moment looked at his friend Goblin Odaigon. He was very glad that he was nearby. Then the main character noticed a guy who was rude to him in the hall. Even then he considered it strange. This guy immediately turned to Krenda. He believed that Rent was afraid of him and said that he would not worry. He would not offend him so much. The main character was shocked by such words and such arrogance. Randy thought to himself that he was a constellation and he should be paired with this eccentric. When Ernest assigned everyone to pairs, he used the highest level of illusion art. After this technique, a purple hole appeared behind them. A very terrible monster began to emerge from this hole. This monster was called a wyvern. It was similar to a dragon, a strong monster defined as rank B and above. It was clear how the others were worried, but Randy didn't care at all because he was much scarier. And the goblin played his game. Ernest noticed that the newcomers were not even afraid, but he was not surprised because the chairman would not recommend anyone. Ernest then ordered his animal to attack them and told them to dodge. Most of the participants were terrified with fear. They realized that they were too slow to evade such a large monster. The blonde guy was not afraid either because he believed that despite his wide breathing radius, his magic would allow him to easily dodge. Then this guy used third-level magic, which is called Hashin's acceleration. The main character understood that they were connected by magic, and he would now be dragged along with him. It was very presumptuous. Then Randy hit him in the neck and knocked him out so he wouldn't be a burden to him. The mighty dragon directly shot with its flames at Randy and the blonde, but the main character managed to fly up and save the lives of himself and this guy. The other curators were very surprised. Ernest's assistant asked if martial arts allowed one to develop such speed. Ernest replied that they were superior to magic in terms of speed and evasion, and this guy was the most outstanding martial arts user he had ever seen. Ernest thought that this was possible due to the influence of the abyss. Ernest believed that the power of his skills was incredible, regardless of rank. Such a hunter is very strong in real combat. Then Ernest understood why the chairman liked him so much. At that moment, the blonde woke up and was very angry that Randy hit him, but the main character said that it was because he was too slow. Randy advised him to move even faster next time. The blonde advised Randy that he would be at a disadvantage. He wanted to use magic and just to adapt to him. At that moment, Ernest snapped his fingers and said that we'll leave it at that for now. He liked how most of the hunters worked, especially Randy. After this, Ernest asked everyone who failed to complete this task to leave the site. Ernest said that the next task will be an attack. Most of the hunters were very tired. They didn't expect that there would be no break. Randy began to feel that the attack would be below because he had a very good sense of distance. After that, Randy grabbed the blonde and flew up because he felt that there was something dangerous from below. And Randy was right, because a huge worm came out from under the earth. It was called by the ancients the sand monster, in the form of a stone eater. He has always been hiding in the ground and, having caught the vibration, attacks and devours his prey. This is a very terrible predator that lives in dungeons of rank B and above. The remaining hunters were in panic. They thought it was too tough for them. Great fear was visible in their eyes. Then Ernest told them that if they could not even react to this, then they had no right to be called hunters. And he advised me to focus on training instead of grumbling. But Randy expected such a test in the Iscaros clan. He said that he liked it.